Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll do a quick roll call. Commissioner Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Here.
Commissioner Szyznowski.
Here.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Here.
Commissioner Cluzy.
Here.
Commissioner Gay.
Here.
Okay, great. And obviously I'm here. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. We've got a long agenda, and we'll just get started right away. First off, as many of you know, Governor Carney yesterday, Thursday, announced his closing of State of Delaware offices for today in recognition of Juneteenth. And actually, I think I heard some federal people speaking about the possibility of creating a national holiday as they go forward to recognize the end of slavery in the United States. So that may be coming. With that in mind, it came pretty late yesterday. So we're still going to have this meeting here. However, in recognition of this date, Juneteenth, we will be shutting City Hall as of noon today. So just wanted to let you all know that, and a press release will go out on that. Moving into the agenda itself, there are a number of different emails that have come into the city, correspondence, many of them to the gross floor area discussion, and also a number of them based on the certificate of permit of compliance for this afternoon's hearing, or this morning's hearing. So that's what's there. With that, we have 3 sets of meeting minutes to approve, and those 3 sets are the 2 special meetings, June 2nd and June 9th, and then the workshop meeting of June 8th. And all 3 of those are 2020. Just 3 sets of minutes. If I could get a motion and a second to approve the sets of minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We'll move right into the city manager's report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Second here. We have one street aid expenditure to Delmarva Power in the amount of $8,934.27 for streetlights.
I move.
Could I?
I move for
go ahead,
approval
please.
of the street aid expenditure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve street aid expenditure of $8,934.27 for street lights. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
The Lake Avenue Streetscape Improvement Project, the bid information for that project was advertised on June 9th, and a pre-bid meeting will be held on Tuesday, July 6th at 10:30 a.m. Bids will be opened on Tuesday, July 28th at 2 p.m. As recommended by the commissioners earlier this week, the barricades were removed in record time. I thank Director of Public Works Kevin Williams and his staff for doing that so efficiently. They were, I think, all removed by 11, no later than noon on Wednesday after the commissioners' Tuesday evening meeting. The barricades are still in place for those restaurants that have requested outdoor dining, and they will continue to remain in place at least through July 31st. The city received a surface water matching planning grant through DENREC. This is for stormwater utility work We were awarded $25,000 for conducting the stormwater utility feasibility study, and the total cost of the project is $50,000. The project kickoff meeting was held this past Monday. And the phase 2 upgrades for the wastewater treatment plant, the electrical upgrade work is progressing, and the contractor is on site working for this project. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the city manager? Okay, thank you very much. City Solicitor?
Nothing new, Mayor.
Okay, great. We're going to move right into the first permit of compliance hearing, requested by Belmore Hospitality LLC. Commissioner Schlosser, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Are we going to discuss separately, or are we going to get an update on the Grove Park project? I'm sorry if I missed it on the agenda, but that was.
It's on there.
Is it coming up?
That will be under new business, old business A.
Okay, all right. I just missed it then. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Again, we're going into the first permit of compliance, which is the Belmore Hospitality LLC. And just to let everyone know, we do have a number of people that will be speaking to this in addition to the commissioners. I believe there are 3 reference to the Belmore itself, and then there are a few people from the public that would like to speak to this. And so I will, once we go through the building inspector's report, then we will open it up to the commissioners and then go into the public hearing and a discussion from the side of the applicant and then the public. So with that, if I can turn it over to the building inspector, please, for his report.
That's Matt.
Oh, can you open up for Matt? Matt is open. Matt, Janice, are you there?
I'm here. I don't see my face yet, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Going to start my video here. Thank you so much. So this first application, number 0420-01, is a new restaurant permit of compliance and dining patio supplemental permit of compliance. This is an application for a new restaurant with a proposed dining patio. It is for Christian Street, which is the Belmore. The applicant is the Belmore Hospitality LLC, 109 Harrison Street, number 301 in Hoboken, New Jersey, 07030. The name of the restaurant would be Belmore Inn. The style is buffet breakfast with small and large plates consisting of sandwiches and sit-down meals offered during lunch and dinner with full liquor service. The restaurant is going to be open from Monday through Sunday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Again, the restaurant is located at 6 Christian Street in Rehoboth Beach. Pursuant to the plans submitted, the following is true. The property is located at 6 Christian Street. The property is owned by Belmore Hospitality LLC, located at 109 Harrison Street, number 301, Hoboken, New Jersey, 07030. The area is not a single-story building. It's actually a 3-story with proposed permanent seated dining in a C1 Central Commercial Zoning District. Pursuant to Section 270-13C 3D, a restaurant serving alcoholic beverages is a permitted use. Service area in the kitchen facilities, storage, restrooms, employee stations, hallways, and utilities. The proposed, as they submitted, was 1,002. I calculated 1,133.33 square feet. The dining area was proposed at 1,218 square feet. I calculated at 1,026.63. The permanent seating dining was submitted as 41. I confirmed that the seating will be 41. The bar area was submitted as 216 square feet. I calculated it as 194.5 square feet. Both the proposed and calculated bar seats were 6. The restaurant gross floor area was proposed and submitted as 1,218 square feet. I, however, calculated that at 2,159.96. I believe the discrepancy there is the exclusion of storage areas that would be directly related to the restaurant itself and its operations. It just probably was missed by the applicant on their end. The ratio of bar to permanent seated dining was 14.6% as submitted. I calculated that as 12.7. Pursuant to section 215.1 definitions, there is a proposed patio with an area of 745 square feet, and 20 seats are proposed on that patio. The site has available a total of 0 parking spaces that would be devoted to the restaurant. However, my understanding that the parking is compliant with the hotel use. The designated areas for proposed food storage and preparation are shown and labeled on the attached plans. The distance to the nearest property lines of the nearest church, public park, and residential lots are as follows. The closest church would be Westminster Presbyterian Church, approximately 867 feet by way of Christian Street east, left into Bayard Avenue, right into Laurel Street. The closest park would be Lake Garrar Park, 1,140 feet away by way of Bayard Avenue and 2nd Street. And the closest residential lot, zoned R2, would be about 55 feet, and the actual address is 204 Philadelphia Street. The applicant has stated that the approximate percentage revenue between the sale of alcohol and food is 40% alcohol and 60% food. Authorization for the city to investigate is attached. Written and dated declaration by the applicant is attached as well, and the fee of $1,000 has been paid. Just to let you know, with the acceptance of these permanent compliances, I've taken it upon myself to categorize when these seats are approved, to get them in our books, so that if there's any questions ever to the seating, we'll have pictures and documentation of exactly what was permitted, and not just the plans for them as well. So everything will be kind of correlate with each other once we get an approval on these things. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Matt. Now we turn it over to the applicant.
Mayor, can I just add
I'm sorry.
something?
Excuse me.
Typically, I'll go through the materials that the commissioners have been provided in connection with the permanent compliance hearing. Because today's agenda has all those materials listed and they're there for anybody's reference, I'll just incorporate them by this reference rather than going through each of them. I also want to remind the commissioners that this is a public hearing, and the code sets out certain things that the commissioners are supposed to consider when considering the permanent compliance. Let me just read those real quickly. This is from Chapter 215, Section 5. So the commissioners are required to consider whether the applicant has demonstrated that the establishment's primary purpose will be that of a restaurant or dinner theater as defined in this chapter, whether the establishment meets all of the city's applicable zoning and licensing provisions, whether the establishment would be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood and the city, whether the establishment will have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or on the city of Rehoboth Beach, considering the impact on traffic, parking, and noise, and whether the applicant had made any false representation or statements to the city's employees or the commissioners in order to induce or prevent action by the city, not only in regard to the pertinent pending application under this chapter, but also in regard to the issuance of a building permit or business license for the subject establishment. So those are a few considerations that the commissioners should take into consideration as this application moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. And just a reminder, this is an application for permit of compliance for a new restaurant permit of compliance, as well as a dining patio supplemental permit of compliance. With that done, I know there are 3 representatives from the Belmore Inn and Spa on the phone, Benjamin Gray, Albert Rothman, and John Tracy Esquire. If you can open up to them, and you all are on the mic and you feel free to speak.
Mayor, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
This is Pat. So I just wanted to verify with Mr. Janis. I think you said the hours were going to be 7 to 10, Monday through Sunday, I guess. But I saw on the application that they were looking on, I believe, Friday and Saturday for closing at 11. Which one is it?
Yes, you are correct, Commissioner. I did miss that, and my apologies. It is Friday and Saturday will be till 11 o'clock. Yes, ma'am.
That is their proposed. Okay, so yeah, personally, I'm ready to hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Matt. Open up to the applicant, please.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
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 Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission for allowing us to virtually present this small project to you this morning. For the record, I am John Tracy with Young, Conaway, Stargatt, and Taylor on behalf of the applicant. As indicated, Albert Rothman from Belmore Hospitality, LLC, and Benjamin Gray, who's the general manager of the property, are on the call as well. We are here before you on a request for a permit of compliance for the small restaurant and dining patio that we are proposing to incorporate within this well-known Rehoboth Beach Hotel and Spa. The hotel and spa has operated this location for a number of years, and it's received a variety of awards over time for its operation and use. My client, whose parent company owns or manages a number of hotels in the locations across the country, purchased the property earlier this year, ironically, right before the pandemic struck. And so as a result, it is now really only just beginning to formally operate the facility. As part of the process of taking over ownership and operation of the hotel, my client desires to more formally establish the dining operations for the hotel by incorporating a small restaurant and dining patio for the benefit of the guests of the hotel, hence the filing of the application before you this morning. It is important to note, however, and for purposes of clarifying the record, when the application was originally submitted to the ABCC back in February, it included a request for a variance to permit speakers on the patio. After discussing matters with the city, again, before the pandemic struck, we have formally withdrawn that request from the ABCC. So there is no request now pending for external speakers on this patio. As Mr. Janis indicated, the floor plans are before you. You can see that both the bar and restaurant area are very small, with 47 total seats, with another 20 seats proposed to be located in the dining patio. And again, those floor plans assume they were submitted before the COVID restrictions came in place, so it would likely be less, obviously, in the short term if we are improved. The dining patio, as you can sort of tell from the floor plans, and Mr. Gray can certainly explain further if need be, which is small, again, at 745 square feet, is very much internal to the site, shielded from the nearest residential street, Philadelphia Street, by existing buildings, the non-dining portion of the patio and pool, as well as fencing in this area. The proposal itself is designed to be an amenity for the guests, as opposed to a dining destination for those not staying at the hotel. As a result, it is not our intention to advertise the restaurant for those not staying at the hotel through radio, online, signage, or other means. The restaurant itself would really have no strong visibility from neighboring streets. As you can tell from the floor plan, it's tucked into the back of the main floor past the reception area, and then the patio is the dining patio is largely shielded from view by the items that I mentioned previously. So we believe it would be largely imperceptible to those who do not otherwise know it's there, namely the guests of the hotel. With regard to the permit standards itself, we believe we satisfy those, the principle of which in this instance, I believe, would be whether the proposed use would be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood, and further, whether the establishment will have an adverse impact on neighboring properties or on the city, focusing on traffic, parking, and noise. And we believe that we meet each of these criteria. One key here for consideration: this is not generally a new establishment in the truest sense of the word. The hotel has existed for some time with the spa, the pools, and everything else that are there. It is offered some food services in the past. So what we're doing here is not necessarily bringing a new use, but simply formalizing a use that has existed for some time. And again, it's a use, given the small scale, it's not likely to have significant change or impact on surrounding properties and surrounding uses. Moreover, as I mentioned, given that this is primarily a focus for people staying at the hotel as opposed to general populace visiting or living in the city of Rehoboth, we don't think there's going to be any impact on traffic, parking, or the like. Mr. Gray, our general manager, has been available to the neighbors and has had a number of conversations with them to introduce them to the changes that we are proposing to the hotel and to answer questions that they may have with regard to the project or our operation as a whole. Indeed, I note that there was one letter that was listed on the agenda today from neighboring residents, the Steels, and Mr. Gray, in response to that letter, has confirmed that it is our intention for loading operations not to use Philadelphia Street, but to focus on using them in Christian Street. Again, given that the hotel is already in operation with all of the other amenities I mentioned, and again, given the small nature of this hotel, or this restaurant use, we don't envision that there will be a significant uptick in deliveries as a result of these uses. That's the general overview of the site. Before stepping away, I was going to see if Mr. Gray, who's the on-site manager, wanted to supplement anything I have said with regard to our proposal.
Morning, Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners. Mr. Tracy, thank you for that overview. As John said, my name is Ben Gray. I've been the general manager here of the Belmore now for 4 years. The Belmore has been a staple of our community for over 20 years, and we are looking forward to this opportunity. I can tell you that although we don't get a lot of complaints, as one of the top-rated hotels here in downtown Rehoboth, from my guest perspective in the 4 years that I've been here, the number one thing that they've asked for over the past 20 years, I'm told by my previous ownership, is we want some type of food and beverage. They want something to eat while they're on property. And we're excited that we're able to provide that for them now. As of today, we are currently offering a breakfast option. By this establishment and by this permit of compliance that we're listening to today, all we're looking to do is just internalize that operation and make it part of the Belmore's normal operating procedures to have that F&B establishment be a part of the hotel. As Mr. Tracy alluded to, this is not something that we're going to have now open signs or sandwich boards out front of the hotel. This is just an amenity for our guests. I can tell you that I have personally met with several of the neighbors here on Philadelphia Street, have given them a tour of the area of where the bar is going to be located, showed them the garden courtyard as well, and was able to answer several of their questions on site a few months ago. I've also taken several phone calls from neighbors and drop-ins from those on Philadelphia Street to reassure them that this is simply an amenity for our guests and not going to be a nuisance for the surrounding area. And lastly, the Belmore has been a staple of our community now for 20 years, and this is just an upgraded experience to add to our #1 ranking in downtown Rehoboth Beach, and something that we're able to add to the guest experience to make sure that they have a wonderful time while they're staying with us at the hotel. All it's supposed to be is just to internalize our current breakfast operation and act as an upgraded amenity for their arrival. So with that said, I appreciate the time to speak today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. We're going to go right now to the commissioner's comments or discussion. Commissioner Gay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I agree with what Mr. Gray just said about it being a beautiful property. I've been, obviously since I live here, I don't stay in hotels, but I have been in it several times for meetings. A chamber had a meeting there in the fall, and it is a lovely hotel, and I'm glad it's here. I wanted to actually ask a couple of questions and make maybe a few corrections, Matt, in the report, and then I have a couple of other concerns. First of all, it's listed here as the C1 district. It actually, some of it may be, but I'm under the impression it is a combination of C3 rather, and that they also have an R1 as part of their property. So it is not all C1, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay. And then the other thing is that in the distances to the property lines of the public park, Martin's Lawn is not shown on there. And that's a public, I mean, it's a city park across the street. So I didn't know whether that should be on there. And I am pleased to hear that it's going to be for guests only. I had wondered about that. One other question I had, is there a building permit associated with this reconfiguration of their space or the adding of the patio?
Not that has been submitted for as of yet.
Is there expected to be? I guess I could ask the applicant that.
Yeah, this is John Tracy. I don't believe, I think the modifications internally are of the type that don't require a building permit. However, obviously, if one was necessary, we would be applying for it.
Okay, because my understanding is that what is the situation on the parking? There used to be there was a variance given for off-site parking, but is that still in place, that you have access to an off-site parking lot?
I'm going to give you my understanding of the parking situation. It's a conversation that I had with the city solicitor about a month ago. At one time, the hotel did have permission to use a number of parking spaces that were, I believe, located across the street.
Yes.
However, when the hotel was substantially revised, I think in the early 2000s, with the acquisition of some neighboring property, the on-site parking was actually expanded such that on-site we now have one more space than what is actually required by code.
If I could speak to that, I believe that Mr. Molina and Mr. Jenny confirmed those numbers, and I believe we are in agreement with them.
Okay, so so there's now an on-site code compliant on-site parking.
There is, I think the code requires 78 spots. I believe we have 79.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's great. Okay. And I guess, I mean, I do want to hear from the public because I know they had some concerns, and I'm glad you addressed the issue of deliveries. I think it would be important to confirm that deliveries would only be on the concrete side. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne.
Yeah, most of my questions have been answered. And John and Ben, I'm really pleased, that the Belmore is in our small city. It is a beautiful, beautiful location, beautiful gardens. I hear from friends and relatives that have stayed there that it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. So, my concerns too have been mostly answered, that you're really not going to be open to the public. So I'm glad that you're gearing up for hotel customers, that deliveries will be required to be on Christian and not on Philadelphia, I think is important. So my only concern is about the 11 p.m. on the weekend nights. If that is just too late in the residential district, or if this is so barricaded by buildings and large plants that no sound will really be going out to the residential area. I think it's something that needs to be considered, because 11 p.m. is late when you are in the middle of a residential area on the Philadelphia side in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. If I could, I'd defer to Mr. Gray to respond to that, given that he's been on site for several years.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I'm happy to answer it. I can tell you from my experience over the past 4 years, a lot of our clients are generally asleep after 10 p.m. here on property. And I see that large issue, having the reputation as an upscale lodging experience. We don't get, for lack of a better term, a lot of riffraff at our hotel. I can tell you that our guests are generally very well behaved, and I don't anticipate extending the bar hours on the weekend to change that.
All right.
And I guess this is John Tracy, just to also put a bow on that. We also have residential units on site that are out in that area, cottages and rooms. So obviously we would be policing the noise levels at those times for our own guests' benefit as well as for the benefit of our neighbors.
Sure, that all makes good sense. Thank you very much.
And one further thing is that we are staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have active security here on site. So that is something that we will continue to police should it become an issue.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Coluzzi.
Yes. This question is really for Mr. Janis. We had a compliance, I forget which restaurant it was, but anyway, there was, we did the permit of compliance first before we did, before there was a building permit. And that turned out to be a rather large mistake. I don't know that that's going to be a consideration here, but can you tell me whether or not you expect there to be a building permit?
As far as I'm concerned, really the only thing they need to install would be some the barriers around the patio. I believe they already have the space interiorly. Probably maybe just for an interior fit out, we would be requiring a permit. But that obviously is on the applicant to provide.
So there's no changing of walls or anything like that, or building a bar or anything like that?
So I'm sure that they're going to be putting in a bar if one isn't existing, so I would expect to see a building permit for that. But as from what it looks like, as far as the patio is concerned, again, the only thing that would be required there would be barriers, and everything else seems to be already in place, other than the bar and the kitchen area. So yes, the department would probably expect a building permit to install those facilities. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the bar is based on what I saw on the diagram, the bar will be inside the building, will not be on the patio.
Correct.
And there's no plans to have a bar on the patio.
Correct. And I think even if we attempted to do that, there were additional approvals that we would need. But no, there's no proposal for a bar on the patio.
Okay. Those were my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, actually, in light of that, I wonder, given the previous issues, and I hadn't thought of this till Commissioner Cluzy brought it up, so I'm glad you did. Are we putting a cart before the horse? Should this permit of compliance hearing be after the building permit is being, just so we know if there aren't any other code issues? I raised one about parking because I was aware that they used to have this previous arrangement, and I'm delighted to know that's no longer an issue, but there could be other issues that would come up. I don't know.
Again,
yeah.
This is John Tracy on behalf of the applicant. As Mr. Janis indicated, a lot of the facilities are already in place. There's no proposal for new walls or anything of that nature. It's really in the nature of like a tenant fit out for purposes of the barrier. That's going to be something fairly light since it's very much internal to the site. And then as Mr. Janis indicated, the construction of the bar and with regard to that, but we're not talking about substantial plans to make changes to the property or to the building that would be necessary to accommodate the use.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly just looking at it from a process point of view since we got sort of caught before. But my question actually goes back to this bit about not opening up to the public, which I understand. I understand the interior bar and the restaurant are tucked back and people wouldn't even necessarily know it was there. However, the patio is pretty widespread. And I guess I have two questions. One is, what type of barriers will be used? It looked like on the drawing it was just those kind of rope, which may satisfy the ABCC, and that's fine. That's one question. Another question is, what sort of outside access points will there be? Because it occurs to me that people walking by would see that there's an outdoor patio and would see people out there, drinking and eating, and would stop in because they see it from the outside. And then that to me seems to have the potential to bring more people in, one. And secondly, if you had like a wedding party or some large group that I guess there would be concerns from neighbors for something like that. So I don't know what the capacity limit is for the patio.
I guess what I will do with that, Madam Commissioner, is I would defer to Ben, since again, he's been on site and is more familiar with the property than I am in terms of access and things like that from the patio.
Okay.
Sure, and I'm happy to speak to it, Madam Commissioner. Thank you for the question. So I can tell you for a fact, all of our garden courtyard area is currently fenced. So it is protected, and it is not only regarding the landscaping, but there is fencing throughout the entire garden patio area. We have not had an issue with members of the general public coming in to enjoy that space. Particularly, it's just been used by our guests, and I think that the fence will help prohibit that type of access.
Right. Okay. Great.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the commissioners, I'll go to the public. Let's start with Wayne Steele. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you again. Just a couple of things I'd like to point out. In the building inspector's report, he said the area was C1. There are 2 lots on the Belmore parcel or complex that are C1, and they face on 2nd Street, where 2nd Street transitions to become Byard Avenue if you're heading south. The remainder of the complex from Christian Street 100 feet deep is zoned C3. All of the lots on Philadelphia Street, the 3rd block, of Philadelphia Street, are zoned R1, including the lots owned by Belmore Hospitality LLC. So that was just a little bit of bookkeeping. You can't see me, can you?
No.
No, okay. Anyway, I'm looking at the zoning map of the city of Rehoboth Beach right now, and I am familiar with the property. We've lived here for quite a long time, back even when the Belmore was known as the Dinner Bell. Anyway, I don't want to ramble. I just want to point out the zoning as it is according to the zoning map of the city. I'd also like to appreciate the efforts of Benjamin Gray, excuse me, in terms of allaying my concerns about delivery trucks and so forth on Philadelphia Street. And that's about it. So thank you for serving the city, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Wayne. Oh, go ahead.
I did want to point out, though, that in the building inspector's report, he stated that 204 Philadelphia Street is R2. And on the 3rd block of Philadelphia Street, all the lots are R1. And that's it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Would Mrs. Steele like to speak?
No, thank you, Mayor Coons.
Okay.
In fact, she had to leave and go to the dentist.
All right. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks.
The next would be Fred Bailey. Mr. Bailey, are you there? I see he's there. He's there and unmuted. I'm going to move on. I'll come back to Mr. Bailey. To Donald Serva.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I currently live at 211 Philadelphia, which actually borders. I mean, when they mentioned before that the closest property was 55 feet, we actually border the R1 units that are on the property. And just as a brief mention, everybody keeps talking about how beautiful the Belmore is. These R1 properties, which are used to house traveling help, are personally, in my opinion, an eyesore. I look out my window at these buildings, and there are broken windows, boarded up windows, a broken fence in the yard. Stuff is stored in the yard. So it's kind of the ignored portion of the property. But there is a gap in there that allows sound to come through. And during the day, we hear the kids in the pool laughing, which I have no problem with. This is a vacation town. People should be enjoying themselves. But when they say that noise is blocked from the Belmore Hotel, that's not completely true. We can hear those pool noises all day long. Fortunately, most of them calm down by 10, and the pool closes at dusk. I mean, tomorrow is the beginning of summer, which will be the longest day that technically the pool's open, and that's only till about 8:30. So now when I hear that there's potential noise going to be originating from a patio that will go to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, I sit out on my porch and like to enjoy my quiet evenings. I'm concerned about what kind of noise that's going to generate. I mean, the seating is 12, but what is the actual occupancy? How many people can stand there? What's going to happen when there are group parties such as weddings, when you have a more, the Belmore does not usually have rowdy type people there, but when you have a big party celebrating, that generates more noise. So they didn't mention what the total occupancy of that patio was going to be. So, and then regarding the music, they did withdraw their application for amplified speakers, but will there be acoustic sound people playing on the patio that we'll be able to hear? That wasn't mentioned. So those are just some of my basic concerns. The other items that were mentioned that the Belmore is addressing, the parking and the deliveries, I feel that's good. My major concern living immediately next door to the Belmore is going to be the sound that this outdoor patio will generate.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, would you like to address that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to address those concerns. They are, of course, valid concerns. As a resident of downtown Rehoboth, I can tell you that as the general manager of the property, I have a commitment not only to my guests, but to the residents of downtown Rehoboth to maintain a luxury establishment. And we have a #1 ranking in downtown Rehoboth for a reason. For several of the neighbors, some of which are probably on this call and some of which I've already met with over the past couple of months, each and every person that I've met with so far has my personal cell phone number, and I have told them to call me directly if there's ever an issue related to this application. And thankfully, we haven't had any phone calls yet. I don't think that we will as we continue to move forward, but I can tell you that I am readily available. And of course, our staff is 24 hours a day to control that noise issue. I don't believe that noise has ever been an issue. Since I've been the general manager here for the past 4 years, we've never had a complaint regarding the noise. I can speak to the fact that our guests are certainly well behaved, and regarding the noise from the pool, I know that that's generally something that, as the gentleman explained, he's been handling for the past couple of years. It's a little bit more difficult for us to control that, but again, we will be closing at dusk. Regarding the bar and the patio, I do believe that that's a less open air area. There is a lot more barriers there that can help control the sound. And to his point, we actually have guests that are out there up until 10 or 11 o'clock even now. And that area, because it is lit at night, people do enjoy that area on a regular basis. And I can tell you that guests are enjoying it as early as last night and with no issue. I don't foresee that being a continued issue when this is approved and when the restaurant is built as well. So just to reiterate my commitment to not only our guests, but also to the community, that we will do everything in our power to ensure that it is a safe and quiet environment, not only for our guests of the hotel, but also for those on Philadelphia Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Appreciate that. Let me step back to Mr. Bailey. Fred Bailey, are you there? Can you, is he muted? All right. Mr. Bailey, I know you're there, but I'll go to the next one. John Dewey, please.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I've been reading the materials that were provided to the commissioner, and I've also been able to listen to the conversation this morning. So I won't belabor points that have already been made by others. I would like to further emphasize the need for this city, for the commissioners, for the mayor to protect quality of life in the R1 district. I understand that the Belmore is voluntarily going to be directing commercial traffic to Christian Street, the C3 zone. With the application of the Belmore as an example, I would ask that the mayor and commissioners consider some form of rule-based structure that minimizes, if not eliminates, the use of R1 streets for commercial deliveries. Clearly, Amazon's everywhere. Prime trucks are everywhere. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about huge food service tractor trailers trying to negotiate these streets. I would invite the mayor and commissioners to look at the condition of the asphalt around the intersection, particularly the median at Scarborough and Philadelphia Street, as there has been an increase in truck traffic through the neighborhood that is required for building demolitions and building construction. The median is in increasingly worse shape. More and more trees are becoming damaged. That's something that can't be addressed. It is something that needs to be fixed. I would use this as an example to the mayor and commissioners to please consider the impact of commercial traffic on R1 streets, and to, at an organizational level, put rules in place that would eliminate that risk to our quality of life. And with that, I'll close my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dewey. Appreciate those remarks. One last time, Mr. Bailey. If not, I will close the public hearing and go to Mr. Shrznowski, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Gray, I have one question before I make my comments. I'm not sure that you answered Mr. Serva's question about if there would, you're not having any speakers, but if there's any plan for acoustic music out on the patio.
As of right now, thank you, Commissioner, for the question. There are no plans to have acoustic music on that patio area, but certainly no amplification because that was withdrawn from our original application.
Okay.
And Mr. Commissioner, it's John Tracy. Can I supplement that as well?
Please.
Yeah, there's when we with the ABCC regulates entertainment on patios. It's my belief, particularly because we would have withdrawn the request, that we would certainly need additional permissions from them if we wanted to bring any form of live music onto that patio. But as Mr. Gray said, there are no plans to do that with this application.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Mayor, I think there's two things that I've heard from the public here. One is noise. I think that the Belmore and under Mr. Gray's management, he has been very professional. I appreciate that all of the neighbors have his cell phone number. I think this a business like this is exactly what we want in Rehoboth. And their dedication to being good neighbors is appreciated. We have a noise ordinance which starts at 11 p.m. I think that is sufficient. I think the items that Mr. Gray mentioned and the fact that he has indicated he is a good neighbor and willing to work with the neighbors is sufficient in my mind. The second is delivery traffic. I would recommend that we include a condition that all deliveries be made on Christian Street. And I'd ask Mr. Williams to take Mr. Dewey's concerns and perhaps the median there and maybe come up with a recommendation to the commissioners about delivery traffic in general in the R1 district. But with that, Mayor, I'd be willing to, when you're ready, make a motion with the one condition that I mentioned with delivery being on Christian Street.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schlosser.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Edward couldn't have said it better, quite frankly, than I was going to make kind of a similar comment about deliveries. But I also kind of related to the beginning of this conversation. I know I've been trying for a couple years. I'm ending my term, as you know, but I would encourage the commissioners to work with the city manager in building and licensing to really document the process here going forward. It's still confusing to me what comes first, what should come first. And we don't want to, put any more burden on anybody, a resident or a commercial entity that's trying to do the right thing for our town, to go back and forth with us and have to go through these processes. So I really encourage this group of commissioners to look at the permitting process and publish something that's very clear to everyone, so we don't have to keep having the same conversation year after year about what comes first. That being said, I'm also ready to vote on this. It looks like Commissioner Kaluzzi has her hand up, but from my perspective, I think if what Commissioner Shanowski said about the deliveries is built into the vote, I'm ready to vote. So that's my say. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kaluzzi.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Another question for Mr. Janis. It was mentioned by Mr. Sturva, I believe, that there are buildings on the property that are in not very good shape or not being maintained. I guess the maintenance would be the question. If that's the case, is there something from building and licensing's point of view, are they in, is there a problem from your perspective with the condition of the buildings or the maintenance?
Certainly. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Jenny, our code enforcer, did contact them maybe 2 years ago to fix some of that guttering. And as far as I'm advised from Mr. Jenny, they have corrected some of those issues. Certainly, we will be, the code enforcer will be paying attention, as he does with most of the properties throughout the city. And if we do find problem areas, we certainly will address them as they are found.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gray, would you like to make any comments regarding?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the question. Yes, so we actually have plans to do a full renovation of those areas. Now under new ownership, we have dedicated capital to those areas to make sure that they're actually inhabitable, and we have employee housing. And as our neighbor said, we do have employee housing that is currently using those areas that he referred to, and there are capital expenditures that are going to be dedicated to those areas for future improvements now that we're under new ownership. So certainly appreciate the question. There is an improvement plan in place, and now that we have the capital to spend, that's where it'll go.
Mr. Gray, could you share a time frame with me?
Sure. So we've actually started some small renovations over at one of the apartment areas, which is currently fenced in. We actually did an interior renovation of a brand new roof earlier this year for that area. We also have plans for a brand new roof before the end of this year, going up at 209 as well, and then a full interior renovation that's in the pipeline probably over the course of the next year to 18 months. But I can tell you that a brand new roof was put on as early as February of this year for that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. So it's pretty much immediately after acquisition, we started to put some more money into that area to spruce it up a bit, because it does need some help. But we have dedicated ourselves to making sure that that is improved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gay.
A couple of questions with that. First of all, when is the anticipated opening date of the restaurant bar and the dining patio?
I would defer to Tracy or Mr. Rothman on that.
Yeah, this is John Tracy. We still have to complete the process with the ABCC. Before we can get the license, we would have to actually build out that area, and it would have to be inspected, obviously, by both the city and the ABCC before we could start utilizing it. I think we're I don't think it's going to be a long period of time, but if Mr. Rothman has any specifics he wants to share, I would defer to him.
Yes, hello. We are actually targeting around September, but obviously we're beholden to the permitting process. So, it shouldn't mean much of a difference to most of the people that are on this call, considering our current operation does offer a limited food service to begin with, and the areas are all inhabitable. So as soon as we can get the permitting is just when we would, cross over the ability to take this internal and begin offering the beverage service as well. But hopefully we can get it done by September.
So, and then Mr. Gray, what is the timing on the renovations that you were talking about doing on the other part of the property?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Like I said, the brand new roof was installed in February for that particular area, and we started the interior renovations, some slight modifications inside to get the employee housing ready and up to code for those particular areas. We actually are working on the grounds right now, the landscaping. We just power washed the area that our neighbor mentioned last week, and we repainted that entire side. So it's currently going on right now. I can tell you that my engineer is actively involved in it. We also have some additional contractors that we're looking to bid out the job, but we are actively working on it on a weekly basis. As far as a time frame for it to be fully completed, to be honest with you, it would have to depend on the business of the summer. I imagine that probably some of that will be stalled because he's needed in other directions, but we fully anticipate to have it ramped up. I can just tell you that we have committed to the new roof, the power washing, and the fresh paint as early as last month. So all of that has been completed, and we continue to work on sprucing up the rest of it as time goes on.
Remind me, I don't have the drawings in front of me. Where are there parts of the dining patio that are sort of contiguous to where those cottages are, where that renovation's being done, or is it a completely separate part of the property?
Completely separate.
Okay, so there's nothing in that area, because obviously there's going to be building permits for the renovations, but I guess
Correct.
That doesn't have anything to do with the patio. And the other question I had asked earlier, I don't think I got an answer to, is there an occupancy limit for the dining patio? And if so, what is it?
I'm not sure, Madam Commissioner, what that limit is, although my understanding is when you're on the patio with the licensing that the city requires, that you have to be seated at a table, which right now there are 20 seats provided, which I suspect in the short term could not be any increase due to the COVID-19 restrictions, but the capacity for seating purposes is 20.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve this permit of compliance, subject to the condition that all deliveries are taken on or are done on Christian Street.
You have to make a specific motion to.
Yeah. Thank you. If anybody has that, is able to
I
make it.
do.
Yeah,
I have it as well.
Great, thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Edward.
Edward, go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor, Commissioners, I find the following to be true. The proper application for a restaurant permit of compliance and a dining patio supplemental permit of compliance has been filed. The proper fee has been paid. The proper notifications have been made. That all parties wishing to be heard have been heard. That the primary purpose is that of a restaurant based on the application and the menu submitted. That the restaurant and dining patio meet the city's applicable zoning and licensing provisions. That the restaurant and dining patio would not be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood and the city. That the restaurant and dining patio will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or on the city of Rehoboth Beach, considering the impact on traffic, parking, and noise. That the application had been made, no false statements to the city's employees or the commissioners. Therefore, I make a motion that the city manager issue the applicants a permit of compliance for the operation of a restaurant and a supplemental permit of compliance for the operation of a dining patio to be associated with the restaurant, subject to the condition that all deliveries be made on Christian Street. And that's the motion, Mayor.
Second.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this permit of compliance, given the subject condition of deliveries on Christian Street. Is there any further discussion? If not, Commissioner Sheffer,
Aye.
Commissioner Gay,
Aye.
Commissioner Coluzzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser,
Aye.
Commissioner Szymanowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move right into the second. We're gonna move right into the second permit of compliance, which is for, Dennis Kangia. I apologize if I mess up the name of, Kangia Ventures LLC to serve alcohol in an existing restaurant known as Breakfast Guru Restaurant and Bar pursuant to the City of Rehoboth Beach Code, Chapter 215 Restaurants. And I will open that up to the, Glenn, anything from your perspective, or go right to the building inspector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just incorporate the same comments that I made in the last hearing, the reasons that the commissions are supposed to consider when they look at one of these permit compliant applications, and we'll incorporate by reference all the documents and materials that are listed on today's agenda for this application. Thanks.
Thank you. Go right into the building inspector, please.
This is application number 0420-02. In permit compliance for the Breakfast Guru located at 19 Wilmington Avenue. This is an application for an existing restaurant currently without the ability to serve alcohol. The space is occupied and operated solely by Breakfast Guru. The following is a complete report for the application referenced above to be heard. Pursuant to section 215-3, the applicant is, and again, I will apologize with the mayor, Dennis Kangai, Kangai Ventures LLC, 32463 Wingate Road, Frankfort, Delaware, 19945. The name of the restaurant is Breakfast Guru. The style is a full-service restaurant serving breakfast and brunch. The restaurant is open Monday through Sunday, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. The restaurant is located at 19 Wilmington Avenue here in Rehoboth Beach. Pursuant to the plans submitted, the following is true. The property is located at 19 Wilmington Avenue. The property is owned by Kangai Ventures, LLC, 32463 Wingate Road, Frankfort, Delaware, 19945. The area is a single-story building with proposed permanent seated dining in a C1 Central Commercial Zoning District. Pursuant to Section 270-13C 3D, a restaurant serving alcoholic beverages is a permitted use. As proposed, the service area, kitchen facilities, storage, restrooms, employee stations, hallways, and utilities was submitted as 357. I have them calculated as 1472.06. Again, with the inconsistency there, it is the applicants, what they feel they included with the square footage and what is actually included here in building and licensing. So you will see some discrepancies there. Not that there is any issue with that. The dining area is 1,887 square feet as submitted. As calculated is 1,904.75 square feet. When upon issue of this report, the permanent seating was unidentified. However, we did have a correction to that, and there should be a supplemental page that shows the previous approved for occupancy seating area, which was originally calculated for that permit for construction at 82. The applicant is going to be remaining at 82, and no additional seating will be allowed or provided. The bar area is proposed at 336, and I have them calculated at 185. The bar seats are 18, which included the high tops, but the high tops are included as actually permanent seated for dining and not as a bar area. So The actual seats at the bar are going to be 6 seats. The restaurant gross floor area is 2,925 as proposed. Calculated, it is 3,668.56. That is the entirety of the building. The ratio of bar to permanent seated dining as proposed, it was occupied incorrectly as the high tops. He has them calculated 23% as submitted. I actually calculated them at 6%. Again, there's only 6 seats that are actually bar seats. Pursuant to section 215-1 definitions, there is no patio area proposed. The site also has available a total of 0 parking spaces. The designated areas for proposed food storage and preparation are shown and labeled on the attached plans. The distance to the nearest property lines of the nearest church, public park, and residential lots are as follows. The Westminster Presbyterian Church, approximately 0.19 miles by way of west on Wilmington Avenue, left on South First Street. Lake Garrar Park is 0.26 miles by way of North First Street. The closest residential lot would be zoned R2, that is 528 feet south on First Street. The applicant has stated that the approximate percentage of revenue between the sale of alcohol and food is 25% alcohol and 75% food. Authorization for the city to investigate is attached. Written and dated declaration by the applicant is attached. The fee of $1,000 has been paid, and I believe that the seating has already been documented for this particular restaurant in the original construction.
Thank you very much. We have the applicant, Mr. Kengahi, on the phone. Would you like to say anything, sir?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, and all the commissioners for taking the time to look at our application. We've been in business for about a year, and we had to shut down because of COVID-19. And we're back operational now, and it seems our name is going around, and we're getting a lot of people, which is amazing. We did put up the application for liquor only because we have, I'm going to say probably 10% of our customers will come in and ask for that. And funny enough, as we were talking, we just had a group of 6 come in and they asked for mimosas. And the moment they realized we didn't have that, they left. So that was our main concern as far as us applying for the permit for compliance. And I'm going to try to make this short because I'm actually the chef today. Our chef never came back after we reopened. So I'm kind of doing 2 things at the same time right now. But thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the commissioners. Any discussion?
I've got a question for Matt, Mayor. Mr. Janis, you said that there was a discrepancy in the number of seats on what was originally approved in the building plans and what was in this application. And I don't see a supplemental page. Can you just discuss that a little bit more?
Certainly. So the original submission had an increased seating, and I believe that was the original submitted floor plan for the original permit of construction there. As we approved that permit, we actually had them submit an additional plan that is actually stamped approved as 3619, and it was the final approved layout. Note that he is not changing or adding any additional seats from that initial approval, and those seats comply to the ordinance.
Okay, so this the discrepancy was in oversight on what floor plan was used, not that they were utilizing more seats in the restaurant now than they were supposed to per the building plans.
I believe that to be true. Yes, sir.
Okay. It seems pretty straightforward, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems very straightforward. I'm really pleased that Breakfast Guru is reopening and starting to do well. I understand the concern about wanting and needing to go forward with the alcohol permit. We're really pleased that you're there. This building sat empty for way too long prior to you coming in, and so I'm very supportive of the proposal. So Matt, just a quick question, and I think that you've answered it, but the various square foot calculations that you've made as opposed to what the restaurant has made, there's quite a discrepancy among several of them. Is there any concern there, or is it just a different way of measuring or different areas that are measured?
Now, it is my belief that it was the applicant's just misunderstanding of what's inclusive of what areas. A big example of that would be the high top dining, the high top tables that were originally included in the bar area seating, when actually it should be just encountered in the permanent seated dining. So I believe, according to my calculations, I find there really isn't, although numbers vary, there is no alarming variances from the numbers submitted to the numbers calculated, and nothing that certainly would draw alarm to me saying no, that this permit couldn't go through as unapproved.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gay.
Yes, I will also say to Mr. Kingai, I welcome back. I can't wait to come in there. I love your place, and I look forward to having on Mimosa there. In fact, is there public comment on this one, Mayor?
Have nobody on the list.
Because if not, and I haven't heard anybody say any conditions. If you're ready, I can do a motion for this one.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, is everybody else fine with that? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I find the following this is for a permit of compliance for Breakfast Guru. I find the following to be true: that the proper application for a restaurant permit of compliance has been filed, that the proper fee has been paid, that the proper notifications have been made, that all parties wishing to be heard have been heard. The primary purpose is that of a restaurant based on their application and menu submitted, that the restaurant meets the city's applicable zoning and licensing provisions, that the restaurant would not be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood and the city, and that the restaurant will not have an adverse impact on neighboring properties or on the city of Rehoboth Beach, considering the impact on traffic, parking, and noise, that the applicant has made no false statements to the city employees or the commissioners. Therefore, I make a motion that the city manager issue the applicants a permit of compliance for the operation of Breakfast Guru.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to grant a restaurant permit of compliance for Breakfast Guru Restaurant and Bar. Is there any further discussion? If not, Commissioner Gay.
Aye.
Commissioner Cluzy.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Aye.
Commissioner Szuznowski.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrne.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and thank you very much. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Kengahi.
Thank you so much.
You can get back to cooking.
Yeah, really.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to move right into old business, which old business A is an update on the Grove Park Canal access project and discussion of the memorandum of understanding. And we do have somebody to speak on this issue in the public, but I'll let the city manager go first. And I'm sorry, someone had a comment?
Yeah, Mayor, this is Commissioner Cluzy. I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay, thank you. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Williams, Director of Public Works, has a brief presentation, and it looks like Mr. Miller, our projects coordinator, will go first. Oh. You're not doing your.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public. Kevin and I are sort of going to tag team this update on the Grove Park Canal Access Dock. So I will just provide a summary of the fundraising efforts to date so far. So you should see attached in the agenda today is the MOU, but also a summary of the fundraising efforts, as well as a presentation that Kevin's put together on the construction so far and the costs associated with the project. So I'm just going to touch on the summary of the fundraising. So as you'll see, we have broken out the commitments so far, whether they be grants or contributions, or just funds set aside, in whether it be the bond bill or other sources, by organization. So we have the funds so far that have been raised by the LRCIA, as well as the funds that the city has been directly involved with. A couple points that I wanted to make. You will notice that our ORPT grant for $90,000 just this week, or actually I think it was early this week, late last week, I had submitted our 9th reimbursement request for that grant. So that closes out the $90,000. We've received those funds. So that is everything so far for ORPT has been spent. I'll also mention, which was added just recently under the LRCIA, was a DENREC Community Water Quality Grant. That grant is still pending at the moment. In conversation with Matt Spong from Landscape Architecture Services, that was a grant that was submitted on behalf of the LRCIA, Commissioner Coluzzi. They are hoping, they've applied for $75,000. I have $50,000 in there pending now because they're hoping to receive $50,000. Certainly receiving grant money can be a little difficult with the coronavirus going on. So everybody's sort of tight for cash at the moment, but they're hoping for $50,000. So I've just included that for the time being. I can briefly touch on some of the things regarding the LRCIA. I know Mark Carter is also on the line as well to provide an update as well, and also answer any questions that you might have that I'm not able to answer. So you will see that the WSFS contribution, a total of $5,000, was actually broken out over 2 years. So half of it has already been received. The other half will be received in 2021. My understanding is that WSFS has specifically requested that it be spread out over 2 years due to the coronavirus. And then the same with Dogfish Head. Typically, the larger donations in this amount is typically spread out over a longer period of time. It's been shortened a little bit. So fortunately, they're still planning to contribute some funds in 2021. And I know that they're still working on that. On the city side, we are still working on getting the community transportation funds from Schwarzkopf and Lopez. I will mention that we received an email June 10th, actually, from the Delaware League of Local Governments, just notifying us that the Bond Bill Committee has actually increased the community transportation fund for each legislator from $275,000 to $300,000. So that's an extra $25,000 for each legislator for CTF funds. So that's good news. Everything else, for the most part, from the city has been received. So we have the Transportation Alternatives Program in the bank. We have the Community Environmental Project Fund, the $20,000 in the bank. That is for specific items related to the project. And then the bond bill appropriation also we have in the bank. I think that's just about everything that I wanted to touch on. You can see I've totaled the columns there for what's been spent, what is available, and what is still pending. So far, it looks like right now we're at about 1.175. And that's everything I had in terms of the fundraising. I can certainly answer any questions, and I can also turn it over to Kevin for an update on the costs so far related to the project.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner.
No, go ahead. City Manager, you want to say something first?
No, go ahead. I was just thanking Evan. We keep a pretty up-to-date record on this. Mark Mark Carter can comment basically about any additional funding sources or what the LRCIA actually does, but we're not privy to that until we actually receive that information from Mark or anyone else on the organization.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about this before we go on to Kevin's, but whatever. Can I go ahead? Should I do that?
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So what the bond bill appropriation? What is that? Is that a loan? I just hadn't noticed it before. I mean, it's been there, but I didn't notice it. What is that?
So it's basically a commitment to the city from, in this case, Pete Schwarzkopf, who made that commitment to the city. So that is, an outright grant, if you will, to the city.
It is a grant. It's a grant, not a loan. Okay.
Correct. That comes.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the bond bill, that's essentially directly from the state's budget. So the bond bill is sort of the state's, if you will, capital improvement plan. So within their bond bill, they've designated that amount of money for the Grove Park project.
Okay. And then the last time you did a budget update, there were some of the amounts were bolded because they were available, but we didn't have them in-house. So is this now saying that we actually do have $902,000 in-house able to spend toward the contractor for the paying contractor?
Yes, and Mark could probably clarify as well. Now I have italicized the Shell family contribution of $40,000. My understanding is that is not yet in the bank, but it's on its way to being there. But everything else, to my understanding, and certainly from the city's perspective, we have available.
Okay, and then just two more quick questions. And it's also my understanding, and Mark may have to answer this, that the LRCA is paying the landscape architecture firm directly. Is that not out of any of these funds? Do they have a completely separate budget for that?
I can let Mark explain. Our conversation this week was that they are paying Matt's construction administration fees. I think so far they've spent about $40,000 of that amount, and it is coming from the fundraising efforts thus far.
Okay, so that's being paid by them, but it's also part of the money that's available, showing is available here.
Correct. So they're using those available funds that are shown there to pay for his construction administration.
And that's over and above what we're committed to for the contractor.
This
Yes.
This is Mark from the LRCI. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning all, and almost afternoon, I guess. It's been a lengthy one. I hope everybody's well. And the first thing I'd like to do is just thank Sharon, Kevin, and Evan. It's you guys working together. I think it's pretty exciting. And when Kevin shows some of the slides of some of the progress, I think it'll be exciting to see how the project is moving along. To answer some of the questions from Commissioner Gay, and also to give a little bit of an update on as far as some of our fundraising efforts and what's going on. First thing I'd like to do is say, obviously this is a very interesting year. So fundraising, as soon as announcements are made, we all got locked in our houses, and everything kind of got interesting. But that didn't mean we stopped our efforts. And a few things that we're doing. One is we're working with a variety of other foundations, looking at basically they have application processes where we submit our grant applications, and we can see what we can get funding wise. Some of the ones we're working with, a variety of banks, PNC has a foundation, M&T, Citizen Bank, and such. And an example is the recent one. We were able to get, it's small, but it adds up, 5,000 from WSFS recently, where we had submitted some information and they were able to contribute some to the project. So we're working on several of those type of foundations. We also are continually speaking with some of the companies, businesses, private citizens and such in the area. And, I think we're looking at some funds that are going to start coming in, but like I prefaced everything, it's an interesting year with Corona. So, folks are just being a little, not overly cautious, but, taking their time. The answer on the paying Matt Spong, we've been working with Matt for 10 years on the project, and the LRCI has been paying Matt, for all types of work that over those years. And yes, we are paying Matt. We have our funds. The funds listed are some of the funds that are in. We do not have two separate accounts set up, to answer your question. And we're managing our funds and going to be getting, Evan and I spoke this week. We actually speak every couple of weeks to just touch base on where we're at. And, we're doing our due diligence on our end to ensure that we're able to transfer funds over to the city as the project comes along and progresses. And also, you can see, as was mentioned by Evan, we're working with Matt to go after funds too. Matt's able to help us with things such as the grant, where there's a $75,000 grant. That's the max availability. We're hoping, like every grant, ask for the stars and, or shoot for the moon, get the stars kind of thing. So we're working with Matt for those type of things too, where there's I guess, for lack of a better term, return on investment of more funds coming in perhaps. And there's other grants out there, such as the ORPT, where there's a second phase to that we're able to start exploring, but that submission isn't until September, I believe. So we're keeping our eyes on every opportunity we can. And unfortunately, the 3 months or so that we had businesses stopped, some of our smaller fundraising, campaigns and events couldn't go on because, restaurants weren't open and other things. So that's an update from our end. I can answer some more questions as needed, but that's where we're at right now. And I know Kevin has a couple slides, I think, to show some of the project and stuff as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's very good. It answers it answers the questions. In fact, it does look like there's been progress made in closing that gap between what we were going to fund and what's needed. But so it does look like some of that gap has been closed with the change order that was made to take the landscaping out. But also, what's not accounted for in here when we get the budget each month is, what needs to be in there for paying Matt. So I just, that's kind of as we go forward, we just have to not lose sight of that. My last question is since some of this grant money is not coming till next year, and that's perfectly understandable and expected given the pandemic. But do we know that it would be coming within our current fiscal year, so before March of next year, or do we not know that, or what difference will that make?
I can actually check with the groups on that. I know, for instance, I can speak for Dogfish as the guy that runs our philanthropy program. So in our case, we would be looking at, first quarter next year. But if, so yes, in that sense, which is a considerable amount, coming from us. Right. And then the other ones, I can check into that. I don't have the answer, right now, so I'm not going to make up one.
Thank you.
And if I could also add something too, because I know Mark had briefly touched on ORPT. So I did submit a pre-application for the ORPT grant again. I actually submitted 2 pre-applications. One was for the continuation of the Grove Park Canal Access Dock. The other was for the first phase of our ADA accessible playground at Lake Girard. Because I know there was some discussion about possibly getting grant funds for that project. So in response to those 2 pre-applications, we did get a letter back. It was addressed to the mayor from the Division of Parks and Recreation concerning the ORPT program. They had received 28 pre-applications totaling $2.5 million. They only have $890,000 in funds available for ORPT projects. So their request has been that we cap our request to $100,000. So the discussion, I guess, that needs to take place is whether or not we want to go after just the Grove Park project, just the Lake Girard project, both projects in the amount of $50,000 each. One thing that I will mention, as Mark had indicated, The applications, the completed applications are due September 15th, 2020. And in looking at the application process overview, the applications, full applications are due September. However, a executed document and purchase order likely will not be received until December, January. And the way that the ORPT grant program works, similar to other grants that we utilize, is they will not reimburse for any costs incurred before the purchase order date. So in this event, any invoices that we receive related to the project prior to December, January, we would not be able to get reimbursement for. So I think at that point, it really comes down to what is the project deadline? When is the project anticipated to be completed? I know there's been some discussion about December, January. I think we're still on target for that. But just something to be aware of and something that we'll just have to continue to monitor. So again, we have some time. The full application is not due until September, so just something we'll continue to be aware of.
Great, thank you.
And Commissioner Sheffer, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Mark Carter, the LRCIA, to you, Evan, to Kevin Williams, to Sharon Lynn, to all the folks who have been working so hard for the last 10 years to raise funds for this project that will really enhance the amenities that we can offer and also partner with Lewis and other neighboring coastal communities to really have a wonderful facility for people to enjoy. So I know we get caught up in the discussions of, where's money coming from, but I think there's been tremendous creativity used and hard work to explore the options available to us. And I just can't thank you all enough for the hard work that you put into this for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sosnowski, you had your hand up as well.
Why don't we let Kevin go ahead and finish the presentation before we follow up on any more comments?
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Just fairly brief construction update on the progress that's been made so far out on the canal dock. Here's a kind of a summary of the project funding. As Evan touched on, obviously we awarded a contract for a little over $1.2 million at the board meeting. You also authorized $100,000 for contingency. So we've got a total amount of about $1.3 million. That's kind of a not to exceed amount. The first change order, we did a bunch of swapping of material types. We changed the maintenance arrangement to provide almost $100,000 credit to the project. And then change order 2 covered the relocation of the Verizon line, which was in a position we were not expecting it to be in. And then the removal of the observation deck, which had some problems, structural problems, as we uncovered as we were excavating for the dock itself. So currently our current contract amount is a little over $1.2 million, and we are about 12% complete. Just kind of a reminder, because you may not recognize this on the actual construction side, but you can see how the ramp structure is going to be aligned when it's finally constructed. Let's just give you a little idea as to what the next photos will show. We've got a couple of drone photos. You can see the current state of construction as of about a week or so ago. And you can see down at the bottom, obviously they're starting at the bottom, working up. So there's the bottom retaining wall that will be along that final ramp as it gets down toward the canal. See some of the backfill that's going on, and then the kind of a cutout of where that ramp will tie and have kind of an observation area with some benches and that type of thing at the north end of the project. Kind of another aerial shot much closer in, you can kind of see that wall a lot better. Some of the erosion control things that are in place to keep material from sloughing down into the canal, which is doing very well. And then a couple of shots actually from the canal as we drive by in our favorite boat, taking a look at the bank where you're seeing the construction, and obviously the end wall of the museum. And there it gives you a better appreciation for how that wall is coming up out of the bank and will provide that bottom retaining wall as the ramps work their way down. So just a kind of general comments, a couple of hiccups on the start, with finding the Verizon line in a different location, and then the instability of the observation deck. But contractor's been very agreeable and worked around some things and has provided some really good pricing for doing that additional work they requested. So I think everybody's working really hard to get this project completed. Right now, the completion date is early November, and we don't foresee any issues at this point extending that out. So subject to that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Mayor, if it's fine, I'll just pick up where I where we left off. So a question for Kevin or Mark. I understand that LRCIA has paid for the design work directly, but what have they most recently paying for directly, not in the overall budget?
Okay, this is Mark from the LRCI chiming in here. So right now, I mean, the overall project through the public nonprofit partnership, since the city has the reins on the project, the construction management flow and such, essentially what Evan and I spoke about this week is we have, fund setting in the account for the nonprofit. The city has considerable funds that have come in through working together for a variety of things, the transportation, DENREC grants, et cetera, whatever, those type of things. So the discussion that we had earlier this week is that we can sit down and see, how we have to start, shifting funds over, et cetera, and things. And some of that is based on the timeline of the project with, the billing from the contractor. And also there have been some shifts where some money's been saved, some had to be, that overlook had some concerns on structure. So, there's been back and forth like any project. So that's where we're at on that. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. Other things that we're spending money on will be, working on our campaign as far as, our fundraising, which honestly, since we're a completely volunteer driven organization, there's really not, there's nobody getting paid to do that. So we're out there beating the street on our own time as much as possible.
And Commissioner, I believe part of that question was the design fee, and I think the city actually appropriated some monies earlier on to cover some of that design fee. So I think that's, and I don't know the amount. Someone else in the room may, but I know pretty confident the commissioners appropriated some money for the design earlier, separate from this authorization for the construction.
Correct. I think my question specifically is Commissioner Gay made a reference earlier that some of the landscape fees, I think, were being paid by the organization directly.
I can help clarify that, Commissioner. So the Matt Spong's company is called Landscape Architect Services, and as the essentially like the project manager, that's where you might be hearing the term landscape. It's not actually paying the landscaping, but that's the company that we've been for the last decade working with, and who is helping to essentially shift plans. When the Verizon line was there, he was able to do the documents and work and such. To make sure the project worked and such. So those are the type of fees, the professional fees that we're paying him for. That's where you probably hear landscape because it's in the name of the company.
Okay, so I think my specific question, and it's really just for clarification, and I think Commissioner Gay was trying to get at this before. My understanding is all of that, the items related to those professional fees were coming out of your operating budget, so to speak, with lower donation amounts that have accumulated over time.
Partially, yes, that is correct.
So all of the larger, the Dogfish Head, the Shell Brothers,
right? Those are
all all dedicated just for the expenses that the city is paying, correct?
Yes, like for instance, the Crystal Trust Foundation, the full $150,000 there. Shell Brothers, there's 100 from the Shell Brothers company, and then the Shell family will have 50,000 in after all the checks come in. And 2 of the checks came in last week. There's 1 remaining, so that should be soon. So like those type of funds, yes, those large lump sums are definitely ready to, ready to transfer and such. And those are things that Evan and I had talked about this week on getting together and starting to coordinate all that.
Okay, I just want to clarify that the professional fees that you're paying directly is not coming out of the available funds that we're seeing on this spreadsheet.
No, I would say yes. Some of it is, yes. We have some funds that we have in our account that are, smaller fees, because we're getting some small donations in that are automatically kind of like just rolling into the operating cost, if you will. But at the same time, we're actively, going after contributions and donations and such to continue to fund all aspects of the project, and the professional fees are part of that project cost.
Okay, that helps clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
So that was my confusion, that it wasn't, we know what's been, what we're giving the contractor, or what we budgeted for the contractor, but we don't necessarily know what the final dollar amount is going to be on the landscaping, but that's going to come out of this available funds. So that was my question. I mean, as we go forward, I guess we can know more, but that was one of the kind of open issues to me. Yeah. And I actually have a couple other questions, but.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm actually looking at the MOU, which we had requested when we approved the project, as a way to just, make sure that that our commitment didn't go beyond, the 280 that was, and as I said before, much progress has been made in closing the gap and all that. But in looking at it, a couple things. One, just for clarification, it refers to the feasibility study that was done, almost 10 years ago, and it mentions accommodating 2 30-foot pontoon boats and the kayak canoe launch. I assume that's still the plan. But is there any progress toward a water taxi? Is there going to be a water taxi in that area?
This is Mark again. On that aspect, there's an active water excursion service in the area. And, conversations have been had, but without the infrastructure in place, it hasn't been taken to the next level per se, as far as now that, for years it's been part of the discussion. There's actually, a hole in the ground now. And I think that conversation also would involve the city, in the sense, I'm not sure how the city would view a business, licensing, operating costs, anything like that. So I think I would defer that to the city to be, obviously a huge part of that discussion. It's not something that the nonprofit would be the owner, right, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered if that was still in the works, or if there was some.
That individual has 2 boats that are currently running excursions and stuff. Obviously, COVID's been a little interesting for them, but they're since it's outdoors, they're still active.
And then going on to the clauses on page 2, paragraphs 1 and 2, where it mentions that LRCA will bear the sole cost and expense, subject to the city providing up to $280,000. Then it goes on to say late in the last paragraph 6 that this memorandum will serve as a starting point for the drafting of a formal agreement between the parties. And so I guess my confusion all along has been that the MOU is between the city and the funding source, but the city has got a contract with the contractor, and we're not connecting the 3 of them. So I didn't know whether there is going to be a more formal agreement because the city's on the hook to pay whatever the contract bill is. But there's no contract with LRCA for that. There's just the memorandum of understanding. So it mentions that there may be one. That's why I wondered.
No, there is no additional contract with LRCIA.
Okay. And then the last thing is on point 5, where it does say after construction, The city will be responsible for any and all costs associated with use, occupancy, repair, and maintenance. And, you know, that was but I thought that was the change order that went in that LRCA now says they're going to take that on, and that's why we didn't have to have that expense. And then in addition to that, I think there was talk about having a some sort of ongoing fund, you know, a continuing fund for that. I forget what they called it. So again, I'm kind of wondering about the disconnect there, that that it says, the MOU says the city will be responsible. The original proposal or the original contract had LRCA being responsible for 3 years, or had part of the contract for 3 years of maintenance with the contractor. That was taken out because LRCIA says they're going to do it at their expense, but we're still obligated under the MOU.
No, I don't think that relates to the current contract with the contractor, or with the, yes, with the contractor. They are doing the maintenance for the next 2 years. And the city obviously needs to take some responsibility on city property when the project is complete. And the city will do that. But as far as maintenance, that's inherent on the contract.
Oh, so they are doing the 2 years? The contractor is still doing the first 2 years?
LRCIA is.
He's doing the first 2 years. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
And we are also actively looking at working on establishing basically we don't know how it'll be deemed, but there'll be we will continue, like many nonprofits, to host a fundraiser per year or multiple fundraisers, however the plan unfolds that way, to raise funds for, to contribute, to show that this isn't a, hey, here's the dock and we're done. We're continuing, we're committed to the project. And, the goal is to eventually establish a fund that we can, basically set up for continued for, say you want to add an addition there, or you find that there's a new part in the town that along the canal that needs improvement and such. So we're committed to pushing on as long as the canal's around. And I guess it's been there a long time. So
in fact, is the observation deck going to be rebuilt at any point?
That I don't believe. I know there were some structural issues. And now the landings on the walkway will probably provide similar, viewscapes. So I think those aspects of it will be in the actual, you'll be able to enjoy the view, now from at the water level, also at the top level and in the middle as well.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Byrne.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to say that as a resident and as a commissioner, I'm just thrilled with the progress of this project. I'm thrilled with seeing the work that's taking place. Looking forward to a November completion date. I want to congratulate and thank those that are working so hard as volunteers and making great progress on this. And my understanding is that an MOU like this, well, we can kind of pick at it and question it. It really doesn't have legal standing. It's an agreement. It's like a handshake.
Yeah.
And it's very rare to have MOUs between nonprofits and other entities. So I just want to congratulate those that are working so hard to move this project ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Anything else from your perspective on the MOU?
No.
All right, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is consideration and possible vote on changing the time of the regular meetings on Fridays from 3 p.m. to 10 a.m. We did put this out, this question out on the Mind Mixer, and I think you have that information. There were about 50 people that responded, and it looks like about 2/3 of the respondents were in favor of changing the time to 10 a.m. But, again, that's open to the commissioners. I know we scheduled this meeting a couple weeks ago for 10 a.m. and typically our meetings are at 3 o'clock on Friday. Initially, when we went to, Fridays at 7 p.m., that was to get the out-of-town people involved in meetings. Then eventually we went from 7 p.m. to 3 p.m. to still get the out-of-town people involved in meetings, but not to take it too late into the evening, and especially with the staff. And since we've live streamed for the last year or so, we're getting more and more people on the live stream, and probably a little bit less in the regular meetings, depending on what the agenda is. So again, this is completely up to the commissioners. I suggested to put it on the agenda just to speak to it. If we want to stay at 3 o'clock, that's fine. If we want to go to 10, that's fine too. 3 o'clock does take it, when we have meetings that go 3 or 4 hours, does take it into the staff's personal time as well. So that's one of the considerations here. So I'll open that up to discussion. Mr. Commissioner Szymanski.
Thanks, Mayor. At the last meeting, I think, we talked a little bit about, we've got the live streaming now and a lot of people utilizing, and that's great. That's fantastic. But there will be instances where we have public hearings and that people want to be involved and their voices heard. And I want to be mindful of those people that are coming from DC or Philly or Maryland or Virginia that have second homes here. So I'm fine leaving it at 3. I'm fine moving it up a little bit earlier in the afternoon, say 2 or 1. But I just want to be mindful that it's late enough in the day that people coming from those other areas can leave in the morning and get here in time to attend a meeting if they wish to. So I'm generally okay with 3, and I'm fine moving it up a little bit earlier, but I don't think I'd want to move it to the morning. But that's my feelings on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gay.
Yes, in fact, I have to say that the 10 a.m. would be great for me because, it would give me Friday afternoon free, and that's a great thing. However, I have the same concerns that Commissioner Szymanski has in terms of participation. But let me also say that I don't want us to rely on that survey. And this is not a criticism of our survey mechanism at all. I know that we reach about 5,000 people with the survey platform that we have. But there is no way to know that the people who responded are actually our residents and taxpayers. And yet that is who we serve in these regular meetings. And as Commissioner Szymanski said, because these are the meetings that include public hearings, such as the permit of compliance ones that we've had today, such as the one we'll have for the zoning potentially as soon as next month. And I really feel like, I know it was moved. I remember there was quite a lot of discussion for it to be moved from 7 p.m. To 3 p.m. And the 3 p.m. was sort of a compromise in that the out-of-towners, could get here for that meeting. But I'll also point out that if you want to have businesses participating, over many years, they have said that they can't be there in the morning. And look, as recently as the permit of compliance hearing we just had, where you had the applicant in the kitchen. And he was able to do that because we have a video meeting going on. But once we resume live meetings, it would have been hardship for him to be there. So I think we have to look at who our constituent groups are and whose voices we need at public hearings and set a time that works for them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments? How would you all like to proceed? Leave it the same?
Yeah.
Well, just a question. One of the things that has come up in this discussion several times, apparently, and I guess this goes to the city manager, is a concern from city staff having to stay late. Is that a concern? What are the implications of that?
So first of all, we'll do whatever the commissioners decide. We're public servants and we're proud to serve. It's not really a huge task. It's just, Friday when your meetings go on late. Employees would like to, go home after working a hard week. But we'll do whatever you want. It's not, it's never come up that I can't stay or I won't stay. It's just out there when meetings do go over, especially on a Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's been very clear that you and your team are very, very dedicated to this, and that's greatly appreciated always. Well, how about that we consider just moving it up 1 or 2 hours, either 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., and that may deal with the staff situation. That may help.
That's a fair alternative. Commissioner Schlosser.
I've just heard from a few folks that I've queried about it, that they'll be flexible, but it seems like 3 o'clock is the better solution, folks. So, but it doesn't seem to be really strong one way or another. So it just seems maybe keep it at 3. It's a better time, it seems, for a lot of folks that are particularly coming out of town or maybe work during the day. So although the survey was kind of interesting, and I get that we don't know if but it pretty much said 10 o'clock. So Edward, what did you say? I know you've talked to a lot of folks. Did you say 3 o'clock or 10? Because I know you've talked to a lot of people about it.
I think that a lot of people think that 3 o'clock works. And I think particularly the restaurants, they may have a lunch crowd. It's finished. It's before the dinner crowd. So, I mean, I think moving it to 2 o'clock would be a reasonable thing to do. And I just personally kind of like 3 o'clock, but I think 2 o'clock is fine. I enjoy walking to happy hour after a meeting. Sometimes we need it. But yeah, I've heard that middle of the afternoon works for most businesses. But that's just
Edward, are you making a motion for 2 o'clock?
I will move that we change.
Hold on a minute. Commissioner Cluzzi's got their hand up, and I know somebody in the public wants to speak to this.
Yeah,
Commissioner Cluzzi.
Thank you. Yeah, I think moving it to 2 o'clock is a good compromise. And the reason is, if we can keep our meetings to at least 3 hours, right?
At most, you mean.
Then city staff can leave at a reasonable hour. So I think 2 o'clock is a really good compromise. I think that makes sense. And it's right when business owners who are restaurant owners, if they need to come in and talk to us, that's probably a good time for them, because then they won't be, leaching over into the dinner hour. So I think 2 o'clock is good.
All right. Since no one's got their hand up, and before we do anything with that, if we can go to Tom Evans, who is on the phone that wanted to speak to this item.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Mayor and Commissioners. I've actually been speaking about this for years, and while I'll not get my way on this completely, the more that important meetings are held during a period between 8 and 5 o'clock is prejudicial against people who work for a living and can't get time off. It's also prejudicial against people who have businesses, and it's difficult for them to get off at any time, and certainly prejudicial against people in other municipalities who have to commute down here from jobs or they have to take time off. I've always been opposed to having public hearings anytime during an 8 to 5 period, but 3 o'clock can work for many people. Anything earlier than that is not a good solution. I couldn't be a mayor and commissioner if I wanted to be, because I could never get anywhere by 3 o'clock on a work day without quitting my job. So I think ultimately it's prejudicial against people who work, and unless we want to have a mayor and commissioners that are all retired people, I think you should be very kind about leaving it as late as possible. 3 o'clock would be okay, because at least it's not taking off 2 or 3 extra hours of work period. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can take a motion. Anybody?
I move that we change the time of our regular monthly meeting to 2 p.m.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to revise the time of our regular meeting from 3 p.m. to 2 p.m. going forward. Is there any further discussion? If not, Commissioner Taluzzi.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Aye.
Commissioner Szymanski.
I'm going to vote no. Tom Evans just got to me. I appreciate what he's saying.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Aye.
Commissioner Gay.
I'm going to vote no also, partly because I thought Tom Evans' comments were very relevant, but also because this just came up, and I truly don't believe I almost was going to go for it because it's only an hour, but it's more the process. I mean, it just came up out of nowhere, and I'm struggling with it. So if I'm forced to vote now, I'll have to vote no.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Thank you. We'll move right into further discussion on the updated changes to gross floor area. And before we actually get into this, what I'd like to do is summarize where we've been, because this goes back a ways. And just to remind people that this started or took on some steam when the Board of Adjustment had an applicant in front of them asking for a few different things. And it's a commercial establishment over on Baltimore. And one of the things they asked for was to have subsurface parking removed from gross floor area. And, it seems like a good request because we in our code suggest as many cars as possible, let's get them off the street. And so what happened was the building and licensing people said no. It was taken in front of the Board of Adjustment. And the Board of Adjustment said yes, that subsurface parking should be exempt from gross floor area. That was one of the things that came up. Then also the same project came in front of the building and licensing, and they were told no to put a front porch, if you will, on the project, street level, and then balconies on each of the 3 or 4 floors. And what they were asking for is that the porch and the balcony areas not be counted in the gross floor area. And basically the Board of Adjustment stood by the building inspector and said no. And so they did not get their variance there. They did get the variance for the subsurface parking. Then what I recall happening, and I don't have it all, and I know Glenn's here, and I know the building inspector may be on the phone, or is in the room, excuse me. At that point in time, it was stated that any type of porch, patio, deck would be a portion of gross floor area. And in the residential area, there is a 250 square foot exclusion for porches. And in the commercial area, there is not. And so that, and then also at that point in time, and this is where the confusion happened for a number of builders, constructors, as well as people on the street, that all of a sudden the interpretation of our code was that any type of porch or deck above a porch was part of the gross floor area. And for many years in the residential side, that was not the case. In the commercial side, apparently it was the case. And so at that point in time, the building inspector said, not only in the commercial area is it not part of gross floor area, in the residential area, it is part of gross floor area, excuse me. And so that's where I think all this confusion came from. Now, I think in the discussions that we've had as commissioners, we've kind of come to pretty close to a consensus that the subsurface parking, because of what the Board of Adjustment did and the intention of the code in our mind, or in some of our minds, or the interpretation would be to, yes, get as many cars off the street as possible. And so that we seem to come to some kind of a consensus to approve that to be exempt from gross floor area. That's separate. However, you know, there's been a lot of discussion on balconies, porches, decks, commercial, aesthetically pleasing, not aesthetically pleasing. And, you know, we've seen some things come up. Most recently in the Planning Commission, there was a proposal that came in front of the Planning Commission that was pretty close to being up to code, but it was pretty unattractive. It was actually very unsightly. It had surface parking underneath the building and only 3 stories, not many balconies, so on and so forth. So, you know, and what's happened is this discussion has taken a life of its own, and many of the correspondence that we have in the record, as well as conversations people have had, seem to think that if we allow something here, I don't know what it is, if we allow something, we're going to be another Ocean City. We'll never be another Ocean City. So what we need to do here, there's 2 things, is have this discussion moving forward, but then we have to, if we're going to continue along these lines, set a public hearing next month. I would prefer not to get into a long-winded discussion today as a public hearing and then have another one next month. I would like to just, you know, have a brief discussion today on see what the goals are of what we, the commissioners, would like to do moving forward. We can briefly discuss it at the workshop in July, but set the public hearing if we want to go further. If we don't want to go further with this issue, we shouldn't set the public hearing and we should just move forward. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion. Commissioner Schlosser.
Mayor, Mayor, I thank you for the background, but you know, from my perspective, what happened is that, and Glenn, I'd really like you to address this from a ordinance standpoint, but basically the ordinance here really was interpreted differently between commercial and residential, particularly for decks, not just in my understanding, okay, and we've discussed this a lot, and not just decks on the second floor, but all decks, okay? And based on that Board of Adjustment hearing that confirmed that decks and balconies were included in commercial GFA, the city all of a sudden then immediately began interpreting the code to say that decks and balconies for residential properties were now also included in GFA, which means that most properties, I believe, I'm just anecdotal, I've not done a count, I admit that, but many, let's say many properties, residential properties, are now out of compliance with FAR and specifically GFA because of that interpretation that kind of came out of nowhere for residential properties. So my intent for even bringing this up was to fix that so that residential properties are not out of compliance with GFA because of a finding of the Board of Adjustments that applied to commercial entities. That's the only reason I did this. We then, at least from my perspective, and then we added all these commercial and balconies and subsurface and all this. But I'm just saying from my intent when we started this, and I hope we continue down the path to fix this problem, was to make sure that all these homeowners that had approval for decks that weren't included in GFA continue to be in compliance and that decks are not included in GFA for commercial properties, as they have been for as long as I can see. So I would just like to ask Glenn about that my particular comment here and make sure that I have that correct just on the residential side, because I think commercials personally is too complicated right now to go forward with, but I think we have to fix the residential issue that has occurred. So Glenn, but if you could weigh in, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. So factually, I think that you are very close to being correct. The only thing that I would add is that the reason the reason Building and Licensing started interpreting residential the way that commercial was being interpreted is because of the Board of Adjustment ruling. So they were obligated at that point. The Board of Adjustment is our court of law that interprets the zoning law. So once that determination was made by the Board of Adjustment, Building and Licensing was then obligated to take that ruling and apply it across the board. But I agree completely that the initial discussion was generated by trying to, I think, maintain the status quo in the residential neighborhoods as to how it had been interpreted previously. We did then get into, sort of carving out balconies and other things because they became a discussion point. But the initial discussion, if you remember, was very much about the definition of gross floor area and what is an exterior wall. Because the code provides that gross floor area deals with areas that are within exterior walls. And we got into a debate about could a outdoor railing be interpreted to be an exterior wall. So I think we were trying to deal with that initially, and it did mushroom into some greater discussion. So that's where the ordinance is now. I did want to read the synopsis of the ordinance just so everybody understands what is being proposed. It's still the March 17 version. The synopsis says, this ordinance revises the definition of gross floor area and floor area ratio to exclude balconies and subsurface parking areas. It also clarifies that exterior walls are walls that enclose interior space. The ordinance provides that open porches are included within the definition of gross floor area, but that 250 square feet of an open front porch is exempt. So those are the major changes to the code that this ordinance would implement. Like the mayor, I kind of felt as though you all, the commissioners, had gotten to a point prior to the pandemic that you were ready to take it to a public hearing, at least to hear from the public, and then, move forward with some more substantive discussions. And I frankly think that would be probably a real value to at least get the public record on, get a hearing and have a record developed so you can move forward with those public comments.
Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just real quick. I was muted. To finish my comment there, and just for the public as well that's concerned about this is, again, the only intent, at least from my end, was just to get back to the status quo. So residential property owners are not out of compliance with FAR when they were in compliance in the past. But number two, just to be clear that there is money in the budget this year, and I know the city manager is moving forward to look at the overall code and clarify all these things. So that is a secondary action that is going on in parallel to this, because we all know that the code's a mess and it's been for a decade, and we need to fix it, and it's in the budget finally to get it fixed. So I just want to clarify that point. Thank you. I'll go back on mute.
Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, I'm glad to see the emphasis back here on the residential, because yes, that was certainly my understanding, that we were trying to correct or go back to the previous interpretation that I gather has been the interpretation for 20 years with decks. And in fact, when my attached to the and sent to you all yesterday was sort of my summary on and my recommendation. And it's because the commercial piece is so complicated that if we want to go back to the original intent, that I thought that to finish this up and to go to public hearing, we should really be focusing on because that was the purpose from the beginning. So yes, my recommendation was that we take the commercial side, potential, except for subsurface parking. Let me get to that in a minute. But that we finalize the residential piece and take that as the primary thing to public hearing. But the thing that made me really recommend that and put it in writing is I watched the Planning Commission meeting last Friday, and it's very clear that they want to undertake some interim commercial code changes in advance of having a full code rewrite, which everyone acknowledges will take a couple of years. So my feeling is if they're going to be tackling that, and they are the people to tackle that, because I think, as I said last week, it needs external expertise from a planner, that they should just take the issues we have been discussing with balconies and structures and how all that's counted and lot coverage and all that they'll take these issues and merge it in with what they're working on and come back to us. On the subsurface, the only thing I would say there is it's not defined in our code, and yet underground, there is a full definition for underground parking. So I think there's potential there for that to be ambiguous going forward, and I think we ought to avoid that at all costs. So we need to really determine whether it's subterranean. Subsurface could technically be 2 inches down, and yet mostly above ground. So we really need to clarify what we mean by that. And I thought what we meant by that was to exempt underground parking, and there are many good reasons to do so. So I would be fully supportive of that, but being careful to define what we mean. And I'll just say on the residential side, one of the things I think is really interesting about this is, yes, we want to go back to not accounting decks and balconies, but it also, if we're just going to focus on this one area, and I know I mentioned needing outside expertise, but I think we might be able to do this one internally with our own building and licensing staff to make sure we haven't created new ambiguities. And that is, we should at least take the opportunity to look at the current trends at the same time we're restoring the previous allowances into providing some flexibility for the homeowner. For instance, it was mentioned at the workshop, we might want to get some builder input. So I did that. I talked to one, and they pointed out that in our code currently, you can't have a deck over your front porch because that actually causes the front porch not to get the gross floor area exemption. So maybe we want to change that, because otherwise all you're doing is incentivizing up to 500 square feet in the rear. And that has privacy issues for people. I think it's one of the reasons people have come forward. So if we're going to look at it, we need to look at keeping the 250 square foot as an incentive in the front, and possibly providing that same kind of incentive in the back by limiting what the decks and balconies would be. But also to look at, do we still want to, why would we exclude a deck in the front if we're going to be putting decks back in? But that's in there already. So I just raised that to try to use it as an opportunity to really to give people the most flexibility and to make use of current trend.
Thank you. Commissioner Taluzzi.
Yes, I completely agree with Commissioner Schlosser about where we were going with this from a residential standpoint, about the decks, that they shouldn't be they should not be counted in gross floor and GFA, and to make that clear. As for the front porch, since you brought it up, I know we don't want to get in a huge discussion about all this, but I think we ought to stick with what we have done in the past, which is 250 square feet for an enclosed front porch. I don't think a deck is what we're looking for in the front of people's house. That's my opinion right now. I don't know if I can be convinced otherwise, but that we can save that for another time. So the subsurface area parking, yes, we need to move forward with that. And the definition is important, I agree. But one thing I would say about on the commercial side, we need to put some sort of time frame on moving forward with some of these ideas of what we want commercial buildings to look like, okay? What we don't want is what the mayor had said earlier, and is someone coming with a plan for a box with no balconies or a few. That's really not what we want in the town. So, and I know that the Planning Commission, in terms of the comprehensive development plan, has ideas about what we might want in a hotel. It just so happens to be several hotels just came to light in the past couple of years, which is unusual. It's unusual for us to have something like that. So I think that we don't want to be reactionary to this. I think we want to make sure that we are planning appropriately. But I have no problems deferring this to the Planning Commission to move forward, but we have to put a time frame on it. It's sort of like the rewrite of the tree ordinance has been stuck for years now, and I'm really not happy about that. And I don't want to see the same thing happen with this, the idea of where we want to go with what commercial buildings look like in our town. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Szymanski.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree in part with almost everything everyone has said. I agree that the decisions by the Board of Adjustment made most residential properties with porches or patios and decks and balconies non-conforming. And that was the goal here to fix that. I agree that subsurface parking should not count in the GFA. And I think we're all on the same page with that. But I don't want to lose sight of how this started. And that was 2 commercial properties going before the Board of Board of Adjustments. And what they were asking for is that what had been done in the past and was being done in residential areas were the same, and they were treated fairly. And in one case, it was a balcony off of a commercial building, and the other was the hotel on Baltimore not wanting the balconies counted in the GFA because they were not done so in the past, and they weren't done in residential properties, and that was, they showed evidence of that. So while I agree we shouldn't take it to the next step further and say, do we want to incentivize balconies in commercial districts or buildings or hotels? We may not want to go that far now, but I still think we need to be consistent with the commercial properties as well as the residential, and not counting the balconies and the porches in GFA. And I just don't want to lose sight. That's how we got to this point today, was 2 commercial properties just saying, hey, don't treat us differently than we were treated in the past, and don't treat us differently than the residential properties, because in the code there is no distinction when it comes to the balconies or porches. So, and with that, the comments, I just wanted to ask Glenn to clarify one thing, because this was mentioned in many of the letters that came before us regarding this issue. Was we went from resolving this balcony and definition of a wall issue or exterior wall, but then we removed all structures. We removed the all. I think accessory structures are from the being counted. Can you just go back to why? I think it was because of some surface parking, but that was a concern that many people had. So if you could just address that.
Sure. It doesn't really relate to subsurface parking. So the definition of gross floor area is the same definition for commercial properties and for residential properties. However, when the code as it is currently set out provides for how you calculate the floor area ratio, there's a distinction between residential and commercial. So remember, gross floor area is a component of floor area ratio. In the commercial section, it said that floor area ratio includes gross floor area of all buildings and structures. So that word "and structures" caused, in the commercial context, the building and licensing department to consider structures outside of the main building. So pool decks and gazebos, and that's where all those things started to come into, is what is traditionally thought of as exterior space now to be counted within the floor area ratio. So by removing that "and structures" section, that piece of it, it makes the residential calculation of floor area ratio and the commercial calculation of floor area ratio more consistent.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, and sorry for making you go through that again. We've been going through this for a long time, and it's easy to forget conversations that had been had.
Well, I appreciate you asking it, because it is one of the most confusing pieces of the way the code currently is written, in my view.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheffer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think along those same lines, in trying to make sure that we're talking apples to apples type of comparison, as we talk about clarifying the role that porches and balconies play in computing the floor area ratio and gross floor area for residential properties, we're still not relaxing lot coverage limits. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I guess my point is we still have residential setbacks that will remain. And this is to some of the letters that we got expressing concerns about some of the clarifications we're trying to do. But if we're not relaxing the setbacks and we're not relaxing the lot coverage limits, then builders will still, and property owners will still be limited in what they can do as far as encroaching on the properties adjacent to them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that point is out there, and so that they're clarified. It's not going to allow for some of the behavior that I think folks are concerned about.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I go to Commissioner Gay, Glenn, I'll ask you a question. Again, what's happened here is the interpretation by the building inspector of commercial was taken over to residential, so that previous interpretation was this, X, and now the new interpretation was all this stuff was included. Is there a way to flip a switch and just go back to what it was? Or do we have to change the language of what it was in order that no one would ever interpret it differently? Because it sounds like the consensus of the people on this call is everybody wants the previous interpretations of residential. That's one thing.
So I don't think it's as easy as flipping a switch, unfortunately, because once the Board of Adjustment rules not only once but twice that exterior walls can be railings and those sorts of things, then that's kind of the law of the case. So I wish it were that simple, but I think that there needs to be some clarification within the code as to what an exterior wall is for purposes of defining gross floor area.
And that structure, or definition of structure, is in the new ordinance. That the structure is from an exterior wall to an exterior wall.
We clarified that exterior walls are so the new definition of gross floor area is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of a building measured from the exterior face of the exterior walls, and this is new language, which are walls that enclose indoor space, comma, and then the rest is the same. So we clarified, hopefully, on exterior walls.
So given that, if we were to approve that, and we haven't, how does that go to the residential? restoration of what was there.
Sure. So the reason that some of the residential properties became non-conforming after this Board of Adjustment determination is that areas that weren't typically included as gross floor areas, such as pool decks that might have a railing, were now included because the railing was considered a exterior wall, therefore the space within those exterior walls needed to be included. This clarification that exterior walls are only those walls that enclose indoor space would then prohibit the building and licensing department, or would give them direction that spaces such as pool decks are not to be counted as gross floor area.
But as some people have said in their correspondence, that all of a sudden, does that allow freewheeling as far as porches, decks, balconies all over your house?
I mean, I guess we can hear from Matt or Don who are here whether this does something different than the way that Matt on the residential side was previously interpreting gross floor area. If it does, then we need to address it. But I haven't heard from Matt that this will change his way of addressing residential properties in a way that differs from what he used to do. That's a question for Matt.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, as I started in the beginning here was, we need to set we're going to have another discussion at the workshop. We're going to have another discussion during the public hearing. We need to set a public hearing. I don't know that without hearing from the public, without hearing further from Matt, that we're going to be in a different position today than we will be at the public hearing.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, I don't know, I don't think anybody's come up with anything that says, if you cross this out and put this in instead, it works, and let's go from there. I think we just go to the public hearing, or if the commissioners don't want to go to the public hearing and transfer it to the planning commission or something like that, that's fine too.
Well, that's what I've been offered. The next agenda item is a resolution that's been prepared for a public hearing, so I guess get a motion either to adopt it or let's do something else. But that's where I think
All right. Commissioner Gay.
Actually, thank you for that, for those questions and clarifications. You know, if I have to, I'm a little concerned with some of the things Commissioner Shanowski said about being consistent between residential and commercial, because I think we should be anything but. I mean, they're really, the intent and the use of commercial versus residential is completely different. And it was different in the code, and I think it should stay different in the code. And from the studies I have done of the previous projects, commercial hotel projects, the balconies were included in gross floor area. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to push that whole thing off to be incorporated into whatever other commercial changes the planning commission, because we should not do it and they should not be consistent. That's part of that's the huge problem with that part of the changes. But also just a couple of other comments. I want to make a correction. I think I was misleading in my statement about the front, bringing into play the front deck because Commissioner Calusi said we didn't want decks in the front, we want porches in the front. I wasn't referring to replacing a porch with a deck. What I was referring to is the fact that a small bedroom balcony over your front porch now causes you to lose your porch exemption because it's in the code that a deck over the front porch doesn't, you know, it does away with that exclusion. All I'm saying is if we're allowing people to have decks, you know, why would we do that? I understand that having living space over the porch, I get that. In fact, having living space over a deck in the back would cause that not to be counted. I don't know if you all realize that. That's the key, is the living space is what causes something to go from not being counted in gross floor area to being counted. But if there's just a small balcony off the top above a front porch, I don't have a problem with that. And I'd like to give people that flexibility.
Can I just say something here for just a second? Because there's some history with that. Okay. From a long time ago, sure. The previous administration, most of the commissioners, and I don't, it's, you know, everybody can decide how they feel about it now, but one of the reasons why they wanted to count that is they were trying to discourage having balconies in the front, because there was some idea that rental properties, people who build those and have rental properties, that you have renters who are not residents who are hanging out on the front of the balconies, drinking and carrying on like they do out some of the motels here. So just saying That's just, there'll be some residents who come back with long memories and say,
I mean, as I said, I got that question from somebody, who's building a house. But also just remember, that's all now going to be switched to the back. Because, and to go to what, Commissioner Sheffer said, yes, indeed, we do still have the lot coverage. But just know that means you can create a 500, if you decide not to have a front porch, you can actually create a 500 square foot, deck or balcony in your backyard with people hanging off. And the sense I have today is that more people are concerned about the privacy in the backyard versus the front. Part of that is the trend toward creating outdoor living spaces, which are typically done in the back. That's just a trend toward use.
Right.
But the other, and so that'll be an interesting thing. I'll be very interested to see what, how the public weighs in on that. And
that's exactly what I'm only bringing it up because I think the public may weigh in on it. So I'm just giving everyone potentially a preview.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. In terms of the public hearing itself, I mean, my understanding, at least the ones that I've attended in the past, it's pretty much, the ordinance is pretty much far along and only minor tweaks are made. In other words, a public hearing is like the end of the process. It sounds like we're saying here that's not true, that we want the public to weigh in and then we're going to continue on from there, which suggests to me that we may actually end up having 2 public hearings. But I don't mind at all getting the public input. And I would, again, like to only do it for the residential and to define the subsurface. But are we really saying we want that now and then we're going to continue our discussions after that?
Well, from my perspective, again, I think if there's a way to simplify it, it's better. And that's why I said, okay, at the beginning, there's a couple things here. The subsurface parking, the Board of Adjustment went with it.
Right.
Everybody seems to be in a consensus to allow it, given a definition. The solicitor can maybe work on that a little bit more. That's in commercial. And the big disturbing thing is the previous interpretations of residential have been kind of thrown out the door. And I think everybody wants that to come back. Now, if we change the wording, structures, whatever, then it slips away. I mean, maybe we're not supposed to change structures. Or maybe we're supposed to change structures and it only affects the residential. But, again, my fear is, and especially based on the correspondence that we've had, is we'll have a public hearing. And I agree with you, Commissioner Gay. The public hearing will go on for 2 or 3 hours and we won't have anything. So we'll have to have another one. And what I would like to be able to do is have a goal set in front of us. Now, again, I think a lot of the people, the correspondence that's come in doesn't necessarily look at it the same way that all of us do as far as righting a couple wrongs. And their feeling is, if we do this, throw caution to the wind. And so that's why I was saying, maybe we just set the public hearing and go from there and see where people want to be, unless someone's got an idea now to address or adjust what's in front of us. And Commissioner Szymanski, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to comment on apparently my talk before about consistency was alarming to Commissioner Gay. So I just want to clarify. I understand the difference of commercial properties and the intended use is different than residential. What I asked for consistency is how this all started, and that was the definition of what an exterior wall is, not whether we're including accessory structures or not in the GFA. This all had to start with a definition of what a wall is, and I think we can all agree that that should be consistent.
Yes, I agree.
Yep. Now, given that, well, we've got one person that wants to comment on this. Tom Evans.
I'll keep it brief, but I mean, Susan Gay and others have commented on it, but there's several things that have been either left to the side or people keep ignoring, which is subsurface is not subterranean, and Glenn knows that. The mayor knows that. The words do not mean the same thing. Subterranean subsurface can be subterranean, but subterranean is not always subsurface. They have slightly different meanings that give you completely different, at the extremes, different outcomes. So if you don't start with the word that you mean, subterranean will be below ground, and underground is in our code currently. If you're trying to follow our current code, the word is subterranean and define it as such. If you want anything that's above, any portion is above grade, go with subsurface, but then you have to define how much above grade. I would say that comments about the Board of Adjustment, and I take that personally, is that Glenn knows that we do not set precedent. As much as you might like to say that, it's a case-by-case decision-making, which is based on unique or similar properties by varying numbers of individuals. It does not change the code in any way. It may influence what a building and licensing officer does, but it does not set precedent. I would say that the best thing you could do, and I thank Sharon Lynn, I heard there's money in the budget, but I've been saying this for 25 years. And Lisa, I hate to say you're wrong, the code has been junky for 20 years. And an inferior code leads to problems like this. And to put a Band-Aid on it by a single 2-page document in one section of the code, I'm going to guarantee you there are definitions elsewhere, both in 270 and other places, that you don't even know about, that influence decisions that lawyers can interfere with to get an outcome for their client. So if you do not use professional code writers who listen to the mayor and commissioners about your intent and let them do the basic writing and ask you, does this do what you want it to do? And they say, yes, this does what we want it to do, then you're wasting time and money. And I've been saying that for 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Schlosser.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Tom, I'm not sure what I was wrong about. I agree that the code's been a mess for 20 plus years. It's a mess. I mean, it's a mess. That's all I'm going to say on that. I've said it a million times. That's why we put money in the budget to get somebody professional to come in and look at this. I think that's where we're heading. I want to go back to something the mayor said earlier, and actually what Tom said as well. And this is to Glenn. If Tom, who was the chair of the Board of Adjustments for, I'm not sure, Tom, how many years you were, but like the Board of Adjustments is not there to set precedent or whatever. Is there a way to only apply the Board of Adjustment finding that was directed toward one specific commercial application to only the commercial applications of that specific nature, rather than all of a sudden applying it to the residential side when both were interpreted differently for forever? I mean, really, I don't understand why we have to, we adopted that policy, and I'm sorry, it was a knee-jerk reaction. There was, without a lot of thinking, without any discussion with the commissioners. So Glenn, are you making a recommendation that we have to change the ordinance, or, and that the commissioners can actually just say, okay, we're not changing, the residential interpretation just because there was one finding from the Board of Adjustments on one specific commercial application? I'm wondering, do we have to go through this whole ordinance process instead of just saying, okay, for years there's been a different interpretation, so let's continue the different interpretation between commercial and residential, so that many homeowners, many residential properties are not out of compliance? I don't understand this. I mean, to be honest.
Okay, let me hopefully help. So the definition of gross floor area, as I said earlier, it's one definition for both residential and commercial. The definition of floor area ratio is different for residential and commercial, but the definition of gross floor area is the same in residential and commercial. So when the Board of Adjustment made an interpretation of that definition, it was a code interpretation. I agree with Tom Evans that in certain instances, a decision of a Board of Adjustment doesn't have precedential value, but that's generally in the context of variances. When one property gets issued a variance because they have an exceptional practical difficulty, it doesn't mean the next property who also wants an additional 3 feet or an additional, step or stair or whatever it is, they get it too. Because every property is different, and I agree with Tom on that point, but that's generally in the context of variances are not precedential between properties. When you have a judge, that is the Board of Adjustment, interpreting the code and saying, this is what this definition of gross floor area means, unless there are separate definitions for residential and commercial, their determination of that code provision or their interpretation of that code provision has to apply universally to our properties. So gross floor area, I agree, is interpreted or is by code, has some language that's different than in commercial than it is in residential. But the basic definition of gross floor area is one definition that's applied to both commercial and residential. And it goes back to, the definition of exterior wall.
But for years, we've been interpreting it or applying it differently. So isn't there then a precedent set that actually then changes that definition between the two, or has clarified it from a policy implementation between the two? I'm not a lawyer. I'm just wondering what happens when it's been interpreted differently for years and years. Why is there not an ability to use that precedent?
Because the judge said that that's not the right answer.
Okay.
I guess, I agree.
I'm not a lawyer.
I agree. There's this precedent's been set. But once the code interpreter, the person who's been designated or the body that's been designated, has that question put to them, and they make a determination, we're bound by it. I know it's difficult because now it lands in your lap, but that's that.
I'm going to take a question from the public. Rick Perry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had indicated my interest in speaking on this topic, and then I heard you say there was only one person, so I appreciate you recognizing it. As we've discussed in the past in many meetings now on this particular proposed amendment, and as Commissioner Shanowski and Commissioner Schlosser have appropriately pointed out, it all began with a decision by the building inspector as to what he viewed constituted an exterior wall. And I have argued for some time that what was needed most in correcting this problem is to have a clear definition of what constitutes, excuse me, an exterior wall, consistent with the International Building Code definition. I think you're getting close, and it's much better as it is currently worded than it has been in the past. I am still left with a question that I had asked previously, to which I did not feel I got a satisfactory answer, and that was really, what is a deck? And I agree with Commissioner Gay and her comments regarding decks and porches and balconies above porches. And as I understand the current definition of an open porch, I guess I suddenly don't have one because I have a flat roof over the porch with what I would call either a deck or a balcony because it has a railing. And I understand Commissioner Calusi's comments about the past views of prior administrations. I find nothing attractive about a flat roof front porch that doesn't have a railing or something to make it aesthetically more pleasing. And we have other ways to control whatever problems there could ensue from having a deck or a balcony above a front porch. We have a noise ordinance. We have a variety of ways to deal with that. And I think aesthetically pleasing residences are more important to our community. I don't know how far you want to go. I applaud your efforts to correct what I consider to be a very unfortunate situation that got created. And I really feel that you need to clarify the problem of what constitutes an exterior wall. As far as looking at a broader revision of the code, speaking now from my position as chair of the Planning Commission, we have indicated, as Commissioner Gay has stated, that the Planning Commission has for some time now been very unhappy with the mess that our code is. And Commissioner Gay knows full well, having served on the Planning Commission for a period of time, that we have recognized that. We've stated it on the public record. We have encountered many problems with it that actually hamper the ability of the Planning Commission and applicants to move forward with creating projects that are in keeping with what we want our city to look like, be like, and feel like. So, we have stated very clearly that we intend to place on the agenda in the upcoming short period of time discussions regarding recommendations to the Board of Commissioners for what we consider the interim necessities to change the code to make it more workable. And so that will be on an agenda of the Planning Commission in the very near future. And we will begin that process. To the extent that you wish to refer any matters to us for consideration and recommendation, we are happy to receive them. With that, I just want to say one other thing, and this is a personal comment. I'm really dismayed at how few people who seem to be able to be very prolific in their comments on various sites such as Nextdoor Downtown and being critical of what the commissioners are doing, and oftentimes with a great deal of misinformation and misstatement of facts. I don't see them here. And so I wonder, why that is. Are you just hiding behind, a website where your comments can't be publicly heard and seen only by a select few people? But your comments nevertheless influence people because your misstatements become reality because people don't know otherwise. And my suggestion is that if you feel that strongly about these issues, then participate in these open meetings. The city has worked very hard to come to a point during this COVID crisis to allow virtual meetings and the public participation. And if you want a voice in your city, then participate. Thank you. I didn't mean to shut down the meeting.
Thank you. All I can say is thank you for that, Rick Perry.
Bravo, Rick. Thank you. I have a hand up. Can I speak or? Oh, Edward, did you want to go? You had your hand up first.
I was just.
I think the mayor can talk. He's like.
I think the mayor's audio is off again.
Okay.
Glenn, this question is, I guess, more for you. I think we've all realized that we want to hear from the public and that we may need to have 2 public meetings or is there any way that we set the public meeting notice and also have utilize like a town hall or something like that in the interim to get more feedback from people rather than, I guess, having a public or a public meeting and then setting another one 30 days later? Is there some mechanism to encourage more input from the public before or during this process?
I think if you think about it, we've gotten public input to an extent, although I don't think it's all of it. No, I understand. And again, some of the facts are a little bit convoluted. My feeling is if we'd like to set a resolution for the public hearing in the end of July, And, worst case scenario, at that meeting, we set another resolution for the end of August. But I think either way, whatever we do, we've got to, if we're going to set the public hearing for July, and I think we should, so we can get the outside input. But I think we need to put down on paper what exactly we're trying to do. And that's what I was trying to get out of this. I know everybody wants to go back to previous interpretations on the residential side. Absolutely, I'm with that. We talked about subsurface parking. I think that's there. We talked about structure being a wall, not a rail. Is that what we want to do? And then, once we address structure, all of a sudden, are there unintended circumstances that or consequences that happen with the rest of the code? So do we piece things together here and put it in front of the public, or do we wait a longer period of time until we have somebody look at all of it? But I would like to be able to take care of the situation at hand, which is the residential interpretations. And, I would love to be able to say that, okay, the commissioners vote that this is the interpretation as it was. But I don't know that we can do that given the circumstances. And I think, I don't know what the direction is, because I really think that if we set a public hearing, we're going to look at the document that we have in front of us, and we're going to come out with the same thing that we did right now. And we're going to set another public hearing. So I think it's before we go to a public hearing, we need to kind of cement home what we want to accomplish. And I know we want to accomplish, again, previous interpretations on the residential side. That's number one. How do we do that? Number two, who knows? And I think this question's kind of for Glenn.
That's why we pay Glenn the big bucks to figure that out.
Well, look, the issue is, in my mind, is that you have agreement on a few things, but seems to be wildly differing agreement on other things. In fact, I don't think that every commissioner is even in agreement with historically what has taken place with regard to how the Building and Licensing Department has reviewed plans. So, unfortunately, I don't have a magic wand that says do this. I wish, like the mayor, you could vote to have the residential side do plan review like they used to, and vote to have the commercial side do it like they used to, and you could all go to happy hour in a few hours. But I think the only way that perhaps you could, and again, I hate to even throw these things out there because I'm just listening to you and throwing out ideas. The only way that you could perhaps address what is happening in the commercial side without doing anything or what is happening in the residential side without doing anything on the commercial side is to basically, make the provisions that we're talking about as they currently exist in the code applicable only to commercial, and then rewrite those provisions as they apply to residential, making clear that exterior walls enclose indoor space and those sorts of things. I really thought at the outset of this, I thought that clarifying the meaning of exterior walls was going to be enough to really bring things back to the status quo, but that just spiraled into a lot of other considerations. And I think that's a separate issue from the subsurface parking or subterranean or underground or however you want to go. That, frankly, on that issue, to me, I'm not sure why the semantics are really so incredibly important. The idea, I thought, was get cars under the building. If a portion of the underground parking shows, aesthetically you may not want it to show, and then it should be something like subterranean. But if a developer can get the parking under the building, can still satisfy the limitations on stories, and still satisfy the limitation on height, I think to my mind, you still accomplish the goal of getting the cars under the building. So I'm not sure that the semantics as to underground, subterranean, or subsurface are that relevant unless you say to me, we don't want to see the parking, period. It has to be completely subterranean. So I mean, I guess those are my thoughts, but as far as, you know, the simple way to correct everything, my initial view was clarify the definition of exterior walls, fix the subsurface parking, and call it a day. And now we've gotten into a much larger discussion about what are decks and what are balconies, and you know, those were not issues that were raised before the Board of Adjustment, and presumably building and licensing will continue to interpret decks as they previously did and interpret balconies as they previously did, with the overlay of what an exterior wall is.
So what you're saying is we could change the structure is exterior wall is no longer a railing, so that the interpretation would be, as you said, exterior wall, not a railing. So, but how do we get that, if we were to rewrite that, how do we get that to conform to previous interpretations in the residential? Because what I take away from this is the building inspector is looking at the commercial, and his structure at that point in time included a railing as an exterior wall. And so that jumped over to residential saying, oh, in residential, this railing is now an exterior wall, so it's gross floor area.
Right, so I go back to, as I said earlier, the starting place here is the definition of gross floor area. It's line 48 in the ordinance. At line 50, we've inserted, after the term exterior walls, we've inserted, comma, which are walls that enclose indoor space. This definition of gross floor area applies to both residential and commercial. In my view, that language right there should satisfy every building inspector that a railing around an outdoor pool or deck or whatever does not constitute an exterior wall for purposes of calculating gross floor area.
So would that remedy what we're talking about as far as get us back to where we were with previous interpretations on residential? Not
in my mind, for residential, that does it. Again, maybe it's a question for Matt and Don, but to my mind, that would put the residential status quo back to what it was.
Okay, so now looking at this ordinance, you've got it, and you just went over 52, or excuse me, line 48 to 50. Now, we go down a little bit further. Should we just take this other stuff out for the moment?
Well, when you get to line 53, there's a specific exclusion from the definition of gross floor area. Again, we're just talking about gross floor area, not floor area ratio. Gross floor area does play into floor area ratio. In line 53, there's an exclusion, a specific exclusion for both balconies and subsurface parking areas. The balconies exclusion, I think, is because commissioners, at one point, I felt as though commissioners wanted to specifically exclude balconies for sake of clarity, and subsurface parking areas. So, you know.
And now, if we took out balconies, okay, because that's kind of a nebulous situation, and not sure that everybody wants that. And left in subsurface parking areas, because that's where the most recent variance came in. And I think there was a consensus of the commissioners over time that we wanted to get cars off the street and provide subsurface. Now, subsurface, we'd have to come up with maybe a better definition, or maybe it's already in there.
There's no definition of subsurface parking that I'm aware of in the code. There's certainly not one in this ordinance. And again, that might be something that we work with the building officials to determine what is the appropriate definition. But I guess we need to hear from the commissioners as well, because, you know, my view was if you're putting cars under the building and it's somewhat underground, I don't think subsurface means it has to be entirely underground.
Yeah, that's the way I look at subsurface too, is.
Right, if you can satisfy the height limitations and the floor limitations of a commercial building, I thought the goal or the objective was predominantly to get the cars under the building. But that can be worked with. I don't think defining, depending on what the commissioners want, I don't think defining subsurface parking is going to be extremely difficult.
Okay.
Just to be clear, if you remove balconies,
Yes.
I still think it's subject then to a building official's interpretation as to whether the balcony has exterior walls or not. If there's just a railing there, I think this would clarify that that balcony is not.
Even if you took balconies out of this?
Even if you took balconies out, I think a building official could say that there's no exterior wall on the balcony, there is a railing, but it doesn't enclose interior space, so they may not include balconies in their calculation of gross floor area.
But that would be interpretation.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the commissioners. Thank you, Glenn. Commissioner Schlosser.
Yes, Mayor, I think you actually laid it out pretty well and then Glenn amplified what you said on a way and clarified a way ahead. But I would just like to propose for consideration and consensus that we eliminate everything except the updated definition. I think this is what Glenn said, that we eliminate everything except the updated definition of exterior wall and take that to public hearing at this point, so that we can resolve what this all started with. That is the new interpretation that impacted residential's properties. That's what I would just like to propose, so we can move this forward and then make a motion on the public hearing again, which would only cover the resolution of the residential property, and that's the only thing that should be in the proposed draft modification.
So you're basically saying discard the subsurface parking area from discussion?
Everything, and take, I think it was Pat that said, we just ask the planning commission and give them a time frame, or whoever we end up asking for these interim changes. Maybe that's one of the things we have to address within a time frame, but let's just go forward with what we're trying to resolve. And that's from the very beginning. And that was the residential, the new residential interpretation.
Now, Glenn, if we were to rewrite it in that fashion.
If everybody else agrees, I'm sorry, I'm just proposing something to move.
Hold on. Thank you. If we were to rewrite it, does that take care of getting us back to the residential interpretation?
I think it does. Now, I
don't. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
yes. That would.
All right.
Yes.
Commissioner Gay.
As long as you, then would you be leaving in then that in commercial, you wouldn't strike the word and structures. You would leave structures in commercial, even with that definition.
I think what Mr. Schlosser is suggesting is that the only change that is proposed in the code would be the insertion of the phrase, which are walls that enclose indoor space. No other changes.
So that means though, that in the commercial where you have the word and structures, that structures with railings or whatever would count, because they'd still be structures even if they weren't walls. So, right?
Well, look, again, it's subject to the building official. Now,
subject to the building official.
We would leave and structures in, but now I'm sorry, but remember, if you redefine exterior wall to be clearly walls that enclose interior space,
right,
then I think the building official, when they get to the calculation of floor area ratio, they have to consider this definition of walls that enclose indoor space.
The structures aren't necessarily indoor space. They usually aren't.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So structures would still be counted in commercial. That's what I'm getting at.
A structure that has walls that enclose indoor space would still be counted.
That's not what it says.
A bridge over a swimming pool would not be counted, I don't think.
And railings would not be counted as an exterior wall.
But
No,
they're structures.
I agree with what Commissioner Gay is saying, that even if we define what an exterior wall is, it's still going to be counted in FAR. A balcony would still be counted in FAR in commercial because it's including end structures, and it's still a structure.
But remember, FAR is a measure of floor or lot area against gross floor area. If you're saying gross floor area only includes areas that have exterior walls that enclose indoor space, then a deck presumably does not have exterior walls that enclose indoor space. So it would not be included in the calculation of FAR.
But again, I mean, lot coverage, Steve said it better than I'm going to say it, but all those other things are still taken into consideration.
Right.
All
True.
the other variables. So you're not going to have, you know, this big explosion of Ocean City-like structures. You're not, because all those other, Steve, you said it better than I did, but there's other considerations that are going to mitigate the risk of out of control building.
I think he was talking about residential, and I showed 2 examples last week of structures being tens of thousands of square feet. I mean, that's the point, is that it really should be commercial.
All right, we're getting kind of off track again. Again, it sounds like the number one goal here is to rectify the situation, the previous interpretation on residential. And it seems like in residential, basically, if we redefine floor area, gross, whatever, which are walls that include indoor space, that technically takes care of the situation in residential. Now, in commercial, basically, buildings or structures stay in there. And again, this is what we just did with the residential is on the gross floor area, not the FAR, not the lot coverage, anything like that. And is that something that we can take to have Glenn rewrite it a bit, cross something out or put something back in, discuss it at our next workshop, but today set the public hearing for the July meeting? Does that work?
Yes, I think that works. I would move to set a public hearing for, I don't know what the date is. Let me look.
17th.
All right, let's
17th, I think.
On
yes.
July 17th.
I second it.
Okay, let me get that resolution.
So I'll read it.
Yes,
Mayor.
please,
So
go ahead.
The resolution is a resolution by the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach proposing that a public hearing be held on the subject of amending the Rehoboth Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 270, by amending Sections 270-4 and 270-21, relating to gross floor area and floor area ratio. And so the public hearing would then be set for July 17th, at whatever time the regular meeting is set.
17th, and what is our regular meeting? Didn't we just go to 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock, 2 p.m.
2 p.m., and that's day of July. And obviously, we'll have something a little bit more to discuss briefly at the workshop, and then have the public involvement in the actual hearing. We have a motion and a second to pass a resolution to set a public hearing for the discussion of the gross floor area and floor area ratio as discussed. Any further comments?
And just to be clear, it'll be with the amendments proposed by Commissioner Schlosser.
Yes, with the amendments proposed by Commissioner Schlosser.
With,
any?
I'm sorry,
Go
can we
ahead.
just clarify whether that's with or without subsurface parking?
It's without.
Without at this point was my proposal.
Yes.
But I thought all of the commissioners were in agreement that it should be excluded. I didn't think that was an area that we were not all in agreement on.
Well, you're right, because coming into this meeting, in previous meetings, we had come to somewhat of a consensus that made sense because of what the Board of Adjustment had done, the variance, and what we wanted from a code perspective to get cars off the street. However, you know, our primary thing here was to get the previous interpretations on the residential side straightened out. Now, putting the subsurface parking back in our next discussion, that's a possibility. But based upon what we just spoke about, it's just trying to get the interpretations back to where it was. And so that's the motion and the second that is on the table.
Okay.
Again, if we want to revise it at some point in the future, we can. Let me go down the list. Commissioner Kaluzzi.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Aye.
Commissioner Szymanski.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrne. Commissioner Byrne. Dick?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gay.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And Glenn.
He didn't.
I vote aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sheffield.
I'm not
I
gone yet.
apologize.
I'm not gone yet.
Now it passes. I apologize.
No problem.
Okay, we are now into new business A, which is set the real estate tax rate for the tax year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021.
Bless you. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
It's all right. It's coming. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a annual resolution where the mayor and commissioners establish the tax on real property and improvements within the city of Rehoboth Beach. The last time, obviously, this was done was same time last year, 2019, and that tax rate, I assume, is staying the same at
Yes.
.04.
0.04, I believe that's what it was.
Yes. So that would require a vote of the mayor and commissioners.
If I can get a motion and a second to approve the city real estate tax rate for the tax year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021, remaining the same as it was the previous year of .04.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion. Go ahead.
Can I, just a point of order for Glenn. Glenn, I just want to make sure we're doing it correctly. We didn't say that we were potentially voting on this, the way it's worded on the agenda, but it does say set the city real estate tax rate. Does that still?
I think that establishes the expectation that you'll be voting to set the rate, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Anne's got her hand up. Can you bring it in?
Excuse me for the interruption, but that's typically how it's been worded in the past on all the agendas previous to this.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne, for clarifying that. All right, we have a motion and a second to set the tax rate at .04. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. We'll go to new business B, which is submission of nominating petitions for commissioners' approval as to the qualifications of candidates for the annual municipal election scheduled for August 8th, 2020.
Yes.
Just one thing, Commissioner Schlosser has chosen to recuse herself for each of these votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Nominating petition for the Office of Mayor, Paul G. Coons, a resident property owner of the City of Rehoboth Beach, filed nominating petitions for the office of mayor on Friday, May 1, 2020 at approximately 1 p.m. The nominating petitions filed have 17 signatures. 17 of the 17 names were verified to be registered voters of the City of Rehoboth Beach.
Can I get a motion and a second to approve that?
I move to approve the nominating petition for Paul Coons as mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the nomination of Paul Coons' petition as mayor. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I abstain. Thank you.
Stanley A. Mills Jr., a resident property owner of the City of Rehoboth Beach, filed nominating petitions for the office of mayor on Monday, June 1, 2020 at approximately 11 a.m. The nominating petitions filed have 23 signatures. 23 of the 23 names were verified to be registered voters of the City of Rehoboth Beach.
Can I get a motion and a second? Go
I
ahead.
move to approve the nominating petition for Stanley Mills.
Second.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to approve the mayoral petition for Stanley Mills. Any further comment? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you.
A nominating petition for the office of Commissioner was filed by Richard Perry on behalf of Hugh V. Fuller, a non-resident property owner, on Monday, June 8, 2020 at approximately 4:18 p.m. The nominating petition filed has 12 signatures. 12 of the 12 names were verified to be registered voters of the City of Rehoboth Beach.
I move to approve the nominating petition for Hugh Fuller.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the nominating petition of Hugh Fuller for the position of Commissioner. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Patrick J. Gossett, a non-resident property owner of the City of Rehoboth Beach, filed a nominating petition for the office of Commissioner on Monday, June 1, 2020 at approximately 2:00 p.m. The nominating petition filed has 17 signatures. 17 of the 17 names were verified to be registered voters of the City of Rehoboth Beach.
Thank you.
I move to approve the nominating petition for Patrick Gossett for the office of mayor. I'm sorry, for the for Commissioner.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the nominating petition of Patrick Gossett for Commissioner. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
J.D. Legree, a resident property owner of the City of Rehoboth Beach, filed a nominating petition for the office of Commissioner on Monday, May 11, 2020 at approximately 11:05 p.m. The nominating petition filed has 23 signatures. 22 of the 23 names were verified to be registered voters of the City of Rehoboth Beach.
I move to approve the nominating petition for Jay Legree for the office of Commissioner.
Second.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to approve the nominating petition for J.D. Legree for Commissioner. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Rachel Macha, a resident property owner of the City of Rehoboth Beach, filed nominating petitions for the office of Commissioner on Thursday, May 14, 2020 at approximately 8:30 a.m. The nominating petitions filed has 17 signatures. 14 of the 17 names were verified to be registered voters of the city of Rehoboth Beach.
I move to approve the nominating petition for Rachel Mancha.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the nominating petition of Rachel Mancha as commissioner. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Actually, Ms. Mancha is on the line. If she had something to say about this, I would like to ask her to chime in, please.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to say thank you for the nomination, and I look forward to serving our city.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, can I ask the city solicitor a question related to this?
Sure.
It just occurred to me that we have one sitting non-resident commissioner now and two non-resident commissioners running in this election. Can Glenn just articulate how that works? If the two non-resident commissioners or candidates for commissioner were elected and got the highest votes, with one already being on the board.
We can have up to three.
Oh, my apologies. I thought it was two. My apologies.
Yeah, sometimes we get in that quandary some years, but this year, thankfully, we're not in that quandary.
Okay, my apologies. I thought it was a maximum of two.
Thanks.
And commissioners, I apologize for this. I did this wrong. If we can move back to new business A to set the real estate tax rate for the tax year beginning July 1, 2020, ending June 30, 2021. I was mistaken in .04. It is .06. I believe we upped it to .06 last year. So if I can get a motion and a second to approve the new tax rate for July 1, 2020, ending June 30, 2021 of .06.
So moved.
Second.
And that is the current rate, correct?
That is the current rate, yes. I just had it wrong.
Yeah.
We have a motion and a second to approve the current rate for this coming year of .06, the current real estate tax rate of .06. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, apologize for that. We have, let's see, commissioner comments. Any commissioner comments? Commissioner Sheffer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I guess about a week and a half ago, I was approached by a journalist from the Cape Gazette to provide my comments regarding why I have chosen not to run. And I provided that. They were personal reasons. But one comment that I provided that was not included in the article was about how grateful I've been, how thankful to have had the opportunity to serve with so many talented, dedicated individuals, especially the city staff, our law enforcement team, and our volunteer fire and EMT professionals. The reason I wanted to say that is, we spent time today and will continue to spend time between now and election day, vetting the candidates who are running for mayor and for commissioner. And often the people who are forgotten and not mentioned are the hardworking people who serve us every day. We've been going through a very unusual 2020. We've had to deal with a lot of adversity and the need for flexibility. And all of these people have done a fabulous job of stepping up, responding to the quick requests we've made of them. I attribute that to the leadership provided by the city manager, our chief of police, our fire chief, and all the hardworking people that work with them. And I just wanted to make sure that that was made public.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. That was very thoughtful. Any Commissioner Gay?
I just have a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to thank City Manager Lynn and the whole staff for your hard work this week in getting barricades reconfigured. A number of people have commented that it's a great final solution that helps the retailers. It obviously still helps the many restaurants that are serving outdoors. And something actually came to my attention, such that I even went and looked it up because I was curious about this. I think we have so much to be proud of here in what we can offer the public during these transition times in the pandemic. And we've put a lot of effort into allowing restaurants to serve outdoors. And we may have forgotten that a number of them, including some of the ones that are expanding more, but even the ones that didn't expand outdoors, many of them, probably more than half our restaurants, already have outdoor space. There are over 40 restaurants in the city with outdoor dining patios. And I would hope that, Main Street or somebody would publicize that, because we should be very proud of that. And especially where it comes into play now. And with the new provision, the temporary provision to have even more, there's some overlap between them, but still, we probably means we have about 60 now with outdoor space. And I think that's something we should, that the business community should promote.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne.
Yes, thank you. I've got two comments. Recently, the governor's office approved senior centers across the state to be able to begin reopening as early as July 1. So just a quick update on our downtown Cape Henlopen Senior Center. They are gearing up to open on or about July 1, certainly within that first week. And just to let you know, they are working through a very long and rigorous set of health-related protocols. And I've been a part of their discussion. We've had some virtual meetings. They've brought in a nurse practitioner and some other people that have a background in that. So I think when they do reopen, they'll be in good shape in terms of practicing the most appropriate protocols. Many of the previous classes will not take place because it's not possible to do those classes with masks and or with social distancing. They will limit the number of senior members who are able to come in and participate. Temperatures will be taken on a daily basis. Cleaning will happen every couple of hours. No overnight trips will happen for the balance of the calendar year. So just to let you know, if you hear or see anything, that's what's going on there. Second comment, totally different. In recent days, volunteers from the Tri-State Bird Rescue volunteers have been noticing some significant health problems among the young geese, the goslings, particularly on Lake Girard, but in our other freshwater lakes as well. And those health problems are described as goslings having angel wings. That's actually a real term. Yeah. And if you look it up, it means that their wings are starting to turn up and they're not able to fly. And the cause of that is poor nutrition, which means that they are being fed lots and lots of bread, human carbohydrates and human sugar. And so while we have signs posted, Turtle Bridge, around our lakes, this is still going on. And I cross Turtle Bridge once or twice a day walking my dog. We have 4 signs there. I don't know what else we could do. People can lean right on those signs and be throwing the bread in. And, not only is it harmful to the environment in lots of ways, but now we're seeing the actual physical harm to these young geese. And so yesterday afternoon, I got another call from Tri-State Bird Rescue volunteers, and they were going out in the water in kayaks, and they rescued a couple of these goslings, and they'll bring them up to the research center up north and work with these birds and hopefully get them back. But if that condition goes on too long, those geese are never able to fly. So it's a concern, it's a problem. I don't know if we need signage in different places, but as a community, we need to think about this and be on guard, to do something we're not currently doing. And I don't know what it can be, because like I said, we have 4 signs on Turtle Bridge and doesn't seem to do a lot of good.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor. Paul, are you still there?
You can't hear him.
Did I come through to everyone?
Yeah, we can hear you. While the mayor is fixing his audio, I'm just gonna go with my comment. I think I'm the only one with my hand up. I just want to let everyone know that Main Street has secured 2 55-gallon drums of hand sanitizer that they'll have at the office for businesses to come and fill up as they need to. So I think that's a great thing. And hand sanitizer is really expensive, so hopefully having that on hand will help some of the businesses have it. So just want to update you all on that.
Thank you. Yeah, we are having a little audio difficulty. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Just let's see, a couple of things. Future meetings. Again, we do not have a Tuesday meeting this week, but we do have a Tuesday meeting on the 30th to talk further about the comprehensive reopening plan. Our regular workshop will be on the 6th of July, July 6th. And then our regular meeting, public hearing, whatever, on the 17th of July. With that, that's the end of our agenda. We do have Rick Perry on the phone that wanted to provide some comments.
Okay, thank you. I guess I probably had my say with respect to the earlier consideration of the amendment to the zoning code, but I do want to now echo what Commissioner Byrne was saying, and perhaps the city should consider putting up some at least temporary signs. For example, the children's fishing pier here on Lake Girard, maybe we need a series of signs. They may not look great for the time being, but there are the little goslings out there. I see them every day as I walk by. And it's a shame that people don't heed the warnings, but they're doing serious physical damage now. And we should perhaps just hang some signs on the railing, every 6 feet or something, asking people to not feed them because they are causing them physical harm, and make it very clear. And same with the other footbridge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Any other comments, anybody? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.